entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
Oh yeah. Be prepared to be entertained today. It's the annual Father's Day episode. I do this every Father's Day. Have a little bit of fun today. I've done this so many times, it's almost a tradition. Talking about fathers, paternity, lots of other various things, so stick around. Thank you very much. Maybe I'll let it run out. Oh, I don't have the dog cam. Oh, well, I would have put that on the dog cam. Sorry, no dog cam today, guys. All right, that's enough of that. Okay, well, what a day. What a weekend. I was saying last weekend, it's like you're waiting for some fresh horror to look at. If you guys missed yesterday's show on Rule Zero, it was hosted live right here on this channel. So go back and check that out. Been talking a little bit about, actually, I think sort of the theme for this week has been kind of like the emotional coddling, I think, of what we're sort of reaping, what we've sown right now as far as our social order, particularly in this country, but I would say largely in a global sense too. But I'm going to delve into that a little bit today. Not intentionally, let's just say, because every year I do a Father's Day show, right? It seems like I do anyways. Either that or I'm asked to come on and talk about fatherhood, or I'm asked to talk about like masculinity. It seems like the only time you're allowed to talk about masculinity or men's issues or whatever, it seems to be like Father's Day, because it seems to me like on this particular holiday, you can't get around it. It's been around for so long. Like, what is it? Is it in November? I think it's in November because International Women's Day is in like March. I think it's like March 8th. And then for men, I believe it's in November, but I don't know the exact date, but it's like the first or second week of November. And it's International Men's Day. And of course, what happens is everybody piles on and says, it's become kind of this, I don't want to say holiday, but it's this day of recognition, I guess. And it has really nothing to do with like honoring men or recognizing men's contributions to society or what, it's certainly not in the same vein as like International Women's Day. International Women's Day is when we release movies like Captain Marvel, right? I remember that. That was only a year ago. And I was talking about that on March 8th, 2019. And, I think it was 2019. Pretty sure it was on 2019. But we'll talk about, women's issues till we're blue in the face. We have a full month dedicated to breast cancer awareness. The NFL decides you're going to change their uniforms to pink during that month. And we don't really, we're supposed to have some sort of, I guess, awareness of men's prostate cancer and stuff like that as sort of like a health issue. And I think that's only really cropped up because enough guys have sort of made a stink about it. But otherwise, like, trust me, if nobody had said anything about it, you would not hear anything about it. Men are the disposable sex. So we can start there with today's topic, with today's Father's Day topic. But Father's Day tends to be one of those days where recognizing men, and particularly fathers, is almost unavoidable. And of course, every year, and as long as I have been writing, at least certainly as long as I've had my blog up, for the last 7, maybe, well, let's just say 10 years. I've been blogging since 2011, and so about 9 years for that. And then, prior to that at So Suave, I was a moderator on there. And every year when Father's Day rolls around, all the same topics come back up, and all of the same predictable crap comes up. What I mean by that is we have to find some way to reinforce this social narrative that a father can be anything, right? It's almost like, it's like saying, well, a woman can be anything. Like J.K. Rowling just recently got into a lot of hot water, I guess, by saying that only women menstruate, right? Only women have lady parts. And to say that, there's such a thing as binary gender, there's binary sexuality. Like, what's funny to me is you have to spell this out for these people. And this narrative is, again, based all on emotions. So when J.K. Rowling, who is no fan of Trump and certainly no fan of, I guess, not traditional, but certainly conventional ways. I mean, she's progressive, right? I mean, let's be honest. But when she points out that sex is binary, then they run up the flagpole. Well, when you have these occasions such as Father's Day, that's when we have to sort of muddy the water. We have to muddy the water so that we don't think of fathers as being just one thing. They always have to be, well, there's stepdads or there's moms, and moms are just as good as dads. And I've talked about this for a long, long time, how the blue pill for women, which of course is feminism, yes, but it's also the feminine imperative. One day I'm going to do a full show dedicated to making a distinction between those two things. But just for sake of argument, the feminine imperative is whatever social, political, religious, gender, whatever you want to talk, whatever benefits the feminine. That's what I mean by when I say the feminine imperative, the female imperative, whatever benefits it. So when we throw that out there, we have to say, well, fathers can be women too, right? That's the first thing women do is they especially like empowered women. They don't want men to have all the fun, right? Or they want to have some sort of recognition for also being a masculine influence on their children on Father's Day. And guess what? All of the women, all of the sons, which I have called promise keepers, right? All of the sons who have been raised by single mothers are out there and they're crying, oh, well, my mom, she worked so hard for us. And I'm not to take anything away from mom. That's great. Okay. She busted her tail to provide for you and put some food on the table. Great. Okay. Well, there's a lot to unpack in all that, but it makes for a great emotional story. And I wish I had I tweeted this on my Twitter this morning. Somebody sent me a video of I will say a couple of black guys who were talking about why Father's Day bothered them. And the first thing they were doing is just sort of doing this cut up of this video of men and women, well, mostly women, but men and women who were celebrating Father's Day by talking about their single mothers. Now, this is not Single Mother's Day. This is Father's Day. This is not Stepdad's Day. Well, I mean, I guess in a way you could make it that way, but it's still Father's Day. And it is a recognition, should be anyways, at least I would say, I don't know where it came from. This is the idea of Mother's Day or Father's Day or whatever. Obviously it was started by like Hallmark or something like that to sell more cards, or we had to have some special day for I think there's actually a Grandparents' Day too. I'm not really sure when that is. We don't say anything about Grandparents' Day, but I would presume they make some pretty decent contributions if they're still an active part of their grandchildren's lives, right? But we tend to, when we look at Father's Day, we look at it as almost like unisex. We look at it as, okay, well, father can be anything we want him to be. And the reason why I usually start with that concept when I'm talking about Father's Day is because the way we consider fathers right now, the way that we look, and I'm a father myself, and I'm sure some of you are fathers as well. And thank you very much for all the well wishes on Twitter. I'm glad you benefit from what I do. I have a lot of guys saying, well, you're the father I never had. Okay, thank you. I am actually a real father, and not just to my greyhounds right now. I actually have a daughter who is 22 years old. And it's nice. It's nice to be appreciated, and it's nice to, get you get a card and it's nice to be taken out to dinner and all that kind of stuff. Okay, cool. But the way I see Father's Day in sort of our modern concept of appreciate, like we need to honor fathers today. Like, God forbid you honor a father today. God forbid you actually say, well, my dad actually wasn't a deadbeat dad, or it's my dad was great, or my dad was an alcoholic SOB. And it's almost this occasion to not necessarily just deconstruct guys, because there's I'm not going to say it's equal. I don't know really what it is, but it's an occasion that is equally about appreciating a good dad as it is vilifying, demonizing, and tearing down men who happen to be biological fathers. I can run through some stats here. I usually run through a lot of stats when it comes to like single mothers and the incidence of crime, the incidence of drug use, the incidence of incarceration. For all if you really want me to go down and enumerate all of those stats when it comes to single motherhood, but I want to stress right here that when we're talking about fathers, when we're talking about the narrative of actually even recognizing fathers, like acknowledging fathers, you don't have to like lift them up. You don't even have to just to have a day to actually say, well, dads are this or dads are that. It's usually an occasion to muddy the waters with respect to conventional masculinity and what it is. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a father? What does it mean to be, in some cases, a husband? What does it mean to be a conventionally masculine guy today, as opposed to the last, I would argue, the last 4 generations, maybe certainly the last 2, of men who have had masculinity blurred for them. In some cases, I would say deliberately obscured for men. And I mean that in the sense that masculinity has become something that is subjectivized. And that's a word I made up. I don't go look it up in the dictionary. I mean, to make subjective, right? To obfuscate. There's your vocabulary word for the rational male today. Look up obfuscate. It's to intentionally distort, intentionally deceive, I guess, but to muddy the waters, right? To blur things so you don't know what masculinity actually is. And we are seeing right now, I think, particularly in recent events, certainly from the pandemic on, actually, I would say long before that, but like we're seeing it like sort of live in living color right now on Twitter and online and everywhere else, of a product of a blurred masculinity, a subjective masculinity. And I've said this on a couple of occasions. I don't know. I can't really remember. I've written about it. Obviously, I've got today's your reading material, your homework is in the description, in the relevant links that are in the description of this video today. I've got 4 essays down there if you want to do any further reading. It's about paternity. It's about paternity issues, the war on paternity, and you can have a look at that. I have the most recent post. It's actually the first one that's in the set of links there. It's called the new paternity, or the new paternity is what it is. And I wrote those because I've written, like said, 4 essays. Obviously, fatherhood, marriage, and such feature kind of prominently, I think, in book 4, but maybe indirectly. But I've written about this stuff directly for a long time. And when I talk about issues of paternity, when I talk about issues of like when I talk about like polyamory, when I talk about issues of fatherhood, or we talk about we can talk about stats till we're blue in the face, but I can come back to that if we want to. I've got some really nice infographics, but I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper this time. And the reason why I'm sort of harping on subjectivized masculinity right now is because Father's Day sort of is an occasion to still do that, to in some ways muddy that water. And I brought up the whole thing with J.K. Rowling just a minute ago, because in the same sense that we have obfuscated and subjectivized gender in general, right? There's what is it, 68, 70, was it 71 different genders right now? Or we see these pushes to convince a larger globalized Western society that a 3 or 4 year old child has the presence of mind to know whether it wants to live its life as a boy or a girl. And that's all subjectivized. And again, that's my word, but it's all made subjective. So we don't know if Johnny really wants to be a girl. We don't know if he was born. It's kind of ironic that it's based on social constructionism, gender anyways, is what they would like you to believe. But yet Johnny was born the wrong sex. That's like biological determinism, but we're going to talk about it as if it's social constructionism. And that's where you get things like 68 different genders or 79 different genders or whatever it is. I don't even know what, I can't keep up. Right. Right. I mean, it's LGBTQIX, whatever, maybe you can enlighten me in the comments. But the fact of the matter is that it's been blurred. As we've been made to believe that it's not about biology. It's not about evolution. It's not about your evolved mental firmware as a man or as a woman. It's not about, differing sexual strategies, even that, like men and women. It's not about monogamy. It's about whatever flies your freak flag, right? It's about whatever is subjective for you. And the same thing happens in masculinity that it does in gender. So we can masculinize women. We can say, we can float this fantasy out there that there is such a thing as an alpha female, right? Which is basically just an alpha male with a vagina. It's a female human being who has decided that they are going to use a male metric by which they are going to measure their self-worth and their gender and everything else. We don't talk about sort of like innate femininity or an innate masculinity. We don't want to talk about that because that distorts or that takes attention away from social constructionism, which is where we're at when it comes to gender right now. And I for whatever reason. And I covered this in book 4, and I've said this in the past, is that when I'm looking at things like the blank slate, or I'm looking at remember the blank slate, tabula rasa is an enlightened, quote unquote, Enlightenment era ideal. And as we are in this new age, we can sort of see with a better understanding of sociology, psychology, evolution, evolutionary psychology, all the ologies, all the isms, all that stuff. We can pretty much put that lie to rest right now. We just don't want to. We don't have the will to do it right now because it's much better to feel things than to think about things. And to think about things, to actually like come to terms with like determined, biological gender and biological sex, whatever. I hate to even use the term like separate the term gender and sex right now, because that is a key element, I think, certainly of a progressive agenda, but certainly this blank slate agenda. And so when people get upset when I sort of take Carl Jung to task, I really think that you could say, well, he had some really great ideas. Okay, fine. But those ideas are old. And those ideas have been bastardized and they've been ruined. So whatever good he could have done, the bad that was used in distorting it has pretty much outdone all of that good. So when I'm talking about fathers, let's get back to Father's Day. When I'm talking about fathers, it's an occasion, I think, for this sort of gender narrative to reinforce the idea that a man or a father or whatever is whatever you want it to be. You're whatever you want to be. And since I would say the early 70s, well, certainly after the sexual revolution, but let's just say early to mid 70s, there's been a concerted effort to in some way blur conventional masculinity and to ridicule it and to shame it and to call it macho. Remember, that was a big thing in the 70s. Oh, you're one of those macho guys. Ha, ha, ha. Don't try to be so macho. Like machismo, right? Don't be so macho. Don't be a chauvinist. And it was like, if you want to be hip and you want to get laid and you want to do what all the cool kids are doing, then you got to abandon all of that conventional masculinity, because we're in a new age and we're in a new era, man. You could do masculinity is whatever you want it to be. And that's part of that blurring. So when we talk about like what makes for father right now, part of that blurring is, well, I'm a step parent. I'm not the stepdad. I'm the dad who stepped up. Well, there's a whole mechanism, a whole psychological, sociological mechanism behind why you think that. And you don't even realize what you're doing because it's been reinforced for you. And you've been conditioned to believe that you're some superhero because you're a stepfather. And that you really what it was you coming to terms with the fact that was really your only option. It's really similar to what's going on with polyamory right now. I'll talk about that later. I don't want to vilify guys who are actually, stepfathers and they're trying to do a good job, because that's, that was something that they thought was heroic, and now now they have a responsibility. I'm not saying shirk your responsibilities, not at all. But how you came to that decision, how you came to that belief. Same thing with guys who are the products of single mothers, who are very defensive on Father's Day, because they'll call their dad an old bastard. They'll call their dad, he was a drunk, he was abusive. And they only later do they find out that maybe mom wasn't as honest and wasn't as forthcoming, let's say, as he was led to believe. And so once that guy gets to be a young man, once he gets to be in his early to mid 20s, he starts to understand human nature and understand what men and women are about. It's kind of a shock for that guy. This is what I call the promise keepers. I'll talk about those in a little bit here too. But I wanted to start here by explaining that this day, this time, one of the reasons I like to do this show every year is because it also gives me the opportunity to point out just how subjective the idea of being a father or being a man, manhood, or being conventionally masculine really is. Now, I really wanted to use this commercial. I was going to give you. I probably could still do it, but I don't want to get any strikes on my channel or copyright infringements on my channel. But I'm sure you guys remember. I think it was back at the beginning of 2019. It was in January actually of 2019, where we had the Gillette commercial. Produced, paid for by Gillette, Procter & Gamble, let's say, and also produced by a militant feminist whose really sole message in it was to, in some way, repress, hold back men, but at the same time, tell them to do better. And that's what Men's Day or Father's Day or whatever you want to call it is always really redirected by, a gynocentric social order. It's always, men, you kind of suck, but you need to do better. Or you would be better. You could just keep it up, guys. Just keep up with that responsibility. Just keep up with what you're doing. You got to do better. We need our men to do better. And I think that gets a little confused, because the intent and the purpose behind that message is a whole lot different than the message behind like guys in the red pill, like guys who say Rich Cooper or somebody else telling you want to become the best version of yourself as a man, right? But you need to be educated. You need to understand do so, but do so with your eyes wide open. Do so with an informed education before you make those decisions. When it comes from Gillette, when it comes from militant feminist agitprop commercials, when it comes from the larger, I think, message of Father's Day, and you guys can probably go and fish through Twitter and God knows how many other social media right now. Probably Facebook is just chock full of this stuff right now. I don't know, because I have a very limited Facebook tolerance, let's just say. And I've got two Facebook accounts. I've got one that's my personal account, and that's my sort of Rational Male account. But on my personal account, it's off the rails right now. It's all these inspirational quotes from women, and I never needed a dad because my mom was always there for me, and she was a better father than any man could have been. And that's another thing is when you hear messages like that, when we say that a mother can be just as good an example or just as good a masculine model for a child, what we're telling that woman, what feminism and what the feminine imperative is telling that woman, and women at large, and if you're a woman and you're watching this show, listen to this part very, very carefully, because what that message is telling you is that you can be both masculine and feminine. You can be the best of both. Men can't be anything. They can't be the best of the masculine, and they can't be the best of the feminine. And what that does is it reinforces a very common blue pill belief blue pill, I should say, for women. A blue pill conditioned belief is that you are a self-contained, self-fulfilling, self-gratifying thing. And that you as a woman can do anything a man can do, including being a good father for your child, or being a better father, or being a better masculine role for your child. And I think what that does is it ends up creating a generation that is out in the streets throwing temper tantrums right now. Now, again, we can go and we can look at like the stats. Like I said, I can show you. I'll go dig them up if anybody wants to see these. Maybe I'll just put them in the. Actually, I think what I'll do is I'll just tweet them out or something like that, and you guys can see the infographic that I'm talking about. But there's a really great book. It's by Dr. Warren Farrell, and I think and another guy. I think it was the guy that wrote Men Are From Mars. Is it Gray? Dr. Gray? I can't remember. Anyways, they wrote a really great book together, and really I think it's probably more Warren Farrell than anything else, but he's got a great book called The Boy Crisis. And if you want the stats, if you really want to educate yourself on how much better children do with a two-parent family, rather a man and a woman, a conventionally masculine man and a conventionally feminine mother, if you want to see the stats, you can look those up. Dr. Farrell if nothing else, is a consummate statistician. He knows his numbers when it comes to like the gender pay gap, when it comes to, with myth of male power, that kind of stuff. The numbers are there, and you can't argue with those numbers. And when you look at how when a single mother raises a child, not a fatherless home, which is what the narrative usually throws it at. When we talk about single mothers raising children, they tend to raise children who have a higher incidence of incarceration, drug abuse, behavioral problems, unemployment. You just run down the list of kind of social woes, I guess, and it's a pretty good bet that there's a single mother that wasn't able to be the good masculine father that she thinks that everyone on Father's Day wants to tell her that she actually is. So bear that in mind, ladies, because I think that this really hobbles you. It hobbles your understanding of, like, it's this what I call the fempowerment narrative, which is female empowerment narrative, that we've been talking about, or we've been having bashed into our skulls since the late 70s, and that women can just be these self-contained, autonomous things, needing for nothing outside themselves. A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, right? That's the old Gloria Steinem crap. So when you have 4 generations of women believing that, is it any surprise that you've got generation after generation of young men who don't know what masculinity really is for them? Or whenever, like I was saying before, whenever we have like a Nicholas Cruz incident, whenever we have a shooting of some sorts, it's almost, and it's not, I mean, women come out of the woodwork too, but it's almost instantaneous, reflexively. It's sort of what you would call cucked men. I'm not going to call them cucked. I mean, like feminized, blue pill conditioned men, adult men, will come out on Twitter, or if they're part of, if they're journalists or whatever it is, the first thing out of their mouths is, well, this wouldn't happen if we let men just cry more, or if we let men or boys, we didn't bully boys, or we didn't do these, and it's all these old school old order ways of thinking about gender, like old order ways of believing that we raise men and boys in a particular, like a patriarchal society, abusive patriarchal, like there's some like abusive coach that they can't get away from. They smack them upside the head. And what are you crying for? You old sissy, like that kind of stuff. They think that that's still a thing. Yet I can show you the numbers where we have 78% of teachers, certainly in public school. I don't know about private school, but in public schools, 77% of your teachers, if you're a young man, if you're a 5-year-old boy, 77% of your teachers are going to be women from the time you're 5 years old until you get done with postgraduate school. That's the education you're getting. So to say that there's like some patriarchal, it's this masculine patriarchal society, bull crap. I'm trying to be as measured with my words today as possible. Because, and I am, because I want the most amount of people to see this. But so I listened to this stuff, and I wrote and I didn't post it in the relevant links, but I wrote an essay called The Old Lie. And The Old Lie is really it was the germ of the idea of where I'm going in book 4 with old order versus new order thinking. Old order thinking is, oh, well, Johnny gets smacked upside the head by his coaches all the time, and his dad is an abusive alcoholic. No, his dad's probably non-existent because he's probably been removed from the home or has been divorced or God knows what else. I'm not saying there's no such thing as a deadbeat dad. There is, okay? I'm not saying that men aren't violent and men aren't jerks and men aren't whatever. Yeah, okay, I got it. But let's also look at the stats. 43% of children in the United States, and I'm keeping things to this country here, 43%, maybe it's up now, of children are born out of wedlock without a father. In what any article, what any major newspaper, and I'm dating myself, right? Mainstream media will say is a fatherless home. Children of fatherless homes. No, children of single mothers. Men don't have the same ability to become single parents by choice also. It's women that you can, but it's like you got to move heaven and earth to do it. You got to be a very rich man. Either you're going to adopt or you're going to have to find some woman who's going to carry your child to term as a surrogate mother. You're going to pay her. You're going to pay the fertility clinic. You're going to pay whatever else. And then you're going to get your own biological child from a woman that you probably didn't get to go to a egg bank and decide that that's what you wanted to do. I had in 2015, I did my very first live talk, my very first live appearance was at this convention. Thank you, Christian McQueen, in Las Vegas. And it was called the Man in Demand Conference. And after that conference, I had guys who were fathers and they would come up to me and they would say, Rollo, when should I give my son the rational male? When should I, because I don't want him to go through the same kind of crap that I'm going through. I don't want him to make the same mistakes that I did. And that's actually what prompted me to write the second book, which is Preventive Medicine, so that you guys don't come to me and go, wow, I wish I would have had this stuff before. Now you got no excuse. Here's the book, right? Here's the timeline. This is the best I can explain it. But they were coming to me and they were saying, how do I prepare my son for success? How do I prepare my son to understand to become red pill aware? Let's simplify things. And it's really tough for me to make that call because it's sort of individual to the kid itself and how that kid came to be. Or people will ask me, how do I raise my daughters to be like good girls? Or and if that's what you want to, if parenting is something that you consider yourself a red pill aware guy and you're concerned with parenting or you want to become a parent at some point, book 3 is for you. That is Positive Masculinity. And a lot of stuff that I'm actually kind of covering right now is in Positive Masculinity. Again, I wrote Positive Masculinity to help guys who had those questions, right? So when guys ask me this, like they want to avoid all the pitfalls and want their sons to avoid the pitfalls that they fell into. Excuse me, I got coffee today. Bulletproof coffee. Send me my check. So, with respect to how to raise your kids, like in a red pill aware way, I think a lot of that confusion, a lot of that frustration comes from guys who have been sort of acculturated and socialized themselves in blue pill conditioning. Because it's really tough, I think, for guys to sort of come to terms with a conventional, like more of an objective, concrete definition of what masculinity is for them. Because for a long time, they've been taught to loathe their own gender. They've been taught to think that to be more feminine, to identify with the feminine, is more advantageous to them in life. And one of these days I'll dig into what my personal opinions are theories and opinions are about homosexuality. But I will say this, is that I do think that it is not necessarily a choice, but I don't think it's biological. I think it's more behavioral. And the reason I think that is because I've read If you want a good outline, I think, or a good starting point for that is The Red Queen by Matt Ridley. In certain populations, when it is more advantageous to be a boy rather than a girl, or a girl rather than a boy, because it can flip, those populations of animals, and not just human beings, but populations of animals, will find ways to sort of shift over towards a particular gender preference. A good example, of course, is the one-child policy in China that was in effect for a long time, but those have sort of like detrimental effects on that particular population, because now you have all these boys, all these men who've become men in China who can't find a wife, right? I don't know what the actual imbalance is, but as a result of the belief that it is more advantageous to have a boy, if we can only have one kid, we better have a boy, because a boy is the one who can bring in the money and sustain the family and carry on the family name and blah, 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 blah. Well, now I'm seeing, particularly in a global sense, when it comes to empowerment, when it comes to feminism, when it comes to exporting our gynocentric social order all across the world, I think that we're seeing more and more that guys are thinking that it is more advantageous to think like a girl, to identify like a girl, to, like I said, 5-year-old boys, right? We teach them as if they are defective girls. And what happens, I think, on Father's Day is we tend to look at guys like fathers are sort of what I've called, and I've said this in the past, is they're kind of superficial. They are, they're unnecessary, right? They're superfluous. That's what I was looking for. They're superfluous. It's nice to have those fathers, but we don't really need them because we're strong, empowered women and we can do what we want. And we don't really need you, but it's nice to have you. You're not necessary. You're kind of purposeless, but we can't deny the fact that two-parent families do better than single mother families. So, because I think that's also another thing is it's sort of disingenuous about the whole thing is that when we say that, children of fatherless homes or absentee fathers, when absentee fathers are not around, well, the kids do worse. No, they're in single mothers. They're with their single mothers because we have a gynocentric social order that favors putting single children into the custody of mothers. It favors the idea that the man is always the abuser. The man is always the angry one. He's always the one with the potential for violence. He's always the one who has the potential for becoming a deadbeat dad. All men want to do is just go get their rocks off, right? And in a certain sense, I would have to agree with that, right? Because there's a lot of guys, and I say the natural order of things or the natural way of men's sexual strategy is, of course, unlimited access to unlimited sexuality. That doesn't mean that all men can do that, but we're going to look at the apex fallacy and the apex examples of guys who hit it and quit it and move on, and we call them bastards, and women get their emotional indignation high off of that, and that becomes the norm. That's what we come to expect. That's what we think about guys. Guys are just horny and they just want to get their rocks off. We were talking about double standards not too long ago. About how, it's so horrible that how common is this that men can go and have sex with lots and lots of women, but if a woman has, a lot of sex, then she's she's promiscuous, right? She belongs to the streets, right? I'm not going to say the word because we're not at the hour mark yet. So that seems totally unfair. How come we can't do that? Well, yeah, because that's men's natural way of that. If we can get away with it, if not many men can actually perform that as a sexual strategy. We try to find virtual ways of doing it, like pornography and whatever else, maybe prostitution or whatever. But yeah, okay, I get it. But that doesn't mean that, men don't want to be fathers. That doesn't mean that men don't want to be parentally invested in their children. And that gets back to sort of the paternity side of today's talk I want to get into today as well. Because in addition to confusing generation after generation of men about what masculinity or manhood ought to mean to them, or fatherhood in this case, because really what is the culmination of masculinity, right? Well, to have to be a father, right? To have a child and to raise it as your own and to bring it up and teach it in your ways. And it's part of it's you, right? I mean, it's your genetic legacy, or it should be your genetic legacy. Yeah. Slap him on the butt and go out there and take on the world, Junior. Like that's really where we're going. We want to reproduce. That's men solving the reproductive problem. Now we can say, well, guys want to spread the seed. Yes, that is our natural way of doing things. But the best strategy for sustaining and protecting and providing for the next generation is a parentally invested man, is a guy who is parentally invested in, usually, hopefully, his own progeny, right? His own offspring, he's interested in his own paternity. What I'm going to talk about next is I've discussed this from the female side of things for a long time. I've discussed, I think I just did it on Wednesday, the existential fear of women. The existential fear of women is to mate with what she thinks is an alpha male and has the potential at least to have become pregnant by that guy, and then later discover that he's not actually who he said he is. He got in under the radar. It's the guy that is the clever PUA, right? Who got past the hypergamous filter and mated with her, got her pregnant, and now she's having the baby, or she would be forced to, and in times long gone, be forced to have the child of a lesser man, right? A suboptimal hypergamous choice, let's say. And that is because in days gone by in our ancestral past, that could have been a death sentence. That could have been like, if it was with the wrong guy, he got past all the fail safes, or she let her emotional side, or she let her passions, she followed her heart, right? She let her passions get away from her, and she mated with this guy. And then later on, she found out that he was not what he said he was, right? And in a day before the sexual revolution, when we had stigmas, when we had buffers, when we had social mechanisms, shall we say, religion, family, that kind of stuff, to mate guard that woman, whether it's mate guarded by her mated pair, pair bonded husband, let's say, or mate, or it could be her brothers, or it could be her father. Remember, mate guarding is not necessarily just the guy who's got, I've got the mate. Like, I guard my daughter, right? That's an instinctual thing in me. I would argue, I've seen this because my brother has a son and a daughter, and I've seen my nephew become very defensive or very protective, let's say, of his sister when it comes to the guys that she's wants to see, or the guys who are trying to get in there, right? And there's kind of like that. I want to say it's certainly kin association or kin affiliation. I think that's the proper term for it. But there's a protective instinct in men, and it's not just for the mated pair. It's also for your own kids, your sort of kin group, right? Your kin association. So that's the existential fear of women, which is to, become pregnant by somebody who's not who he says he is. Well, what's the existential fear of men? The existential fear of men is to be cuckolded, basically, is to be, you want to know why men get jealous when they think, when their girlfriend breaks up with them and they get with another guy? It's because that woman who they've already been intimate with is now proving in black and white right in front of his face that she, she's going to mate with somebody else, or she's possibly mating with somebody else. Who knows, right? The guy's imagination then runs from there. But the reason why jealousy is triggered is because men have evolved the existential fear, which is to be concerned with their own paternity. In our ancestral past, the only assurances that we had that the child was our child, that we were the father of this child, is whatever the woman told us. You want to know why? It's a term called matrilocal, or matrilinear, I think. Yeah, and I think this is in Jewish cultures. Is the lineage is passed through the woman, because only the women in Jewish cultures know for certain whether the child is actually part of their particular family or their particular tribe. So it was always passed through the females, matrilinear. Most other cultures are patrilinear, but with the social sort of mechanisms in between that would force women into a position of having to buffer the worst aspects of their hypergamy, which is, of course, to cuckold, to have to in some way buffer women's promiscuity. Because again, remember, hypergamy is dualistic. It's there's two sides of the equation. There's the alpha seed and the beta need side of it. So while beta need is a long-term solution, alpha seed often is a short-term solution. And it's not just human females that do this. It's all kinds of, I don't know how many times I have to say this, but after I read Promiscuity by Tim Burkhead, it sort of opened my eyes to how, as humans, we sort of use societal and behavioral means to buffer the worst aspects, or I should say the worst, the antisocial aspects of our innate, let's say, sexual strategies, our mating strategies. And a lot of those buffers are gone now. You want to know why we have 43% of the children born out of wedlock? That's why. Because we have removed those stigmas. We removed those buffers. We removed the limitations. And women will say, well, that's horrible sexual repression. Yeah, but what was the latent purpose of that? Was it because men are just these insecure babies who can't, let a woman do what she wants to do kind of thing? Well, maybe a little bit of that, but there was a latent function of that, which was to ensure paternity, which is men's existential fear. To put all of your reproductive efforts in solving your reproductive problem, it takes a lot, right? I mean, if you, for men, think about it this way, for men to abandon their mating strategy, I said this in Wednesday's show, cardinal rule of mating strategies. For one mating strategy, one sex's mating strategy to succeed, the other one has to either abandon it or they have to compromise it. It used to be that we could compromise it. Now, the expectation is that men abandon their sexual strategy completely, entirely. And just because it's whatever is in the best interest of the child. And I've talked about the cult of the child before, so I won't talk about that right now. But so the existential fear of men, of course, is the fear of being cuckolded, right? And if you don't believe me, you can say, well, how come guys get jealous? How come guys innately mate guard? Why is it that guys have a tougher time getting over a woman after they broke up with her, and particularly if they already have kids with that person? It's because there is something that is on our lizard brain level, our little, what is it, at the base of the brain stem level, hindbrain, that everything it comes back to that. Is she trying to trick me? Are these kids my own? I've talked about the DNA testing. Why do you think that DNA testing is so difficult for men to get right now? You would think like it's easy. We can swab for COVID up your nose. You can certainly find out whether the kid is yours or not. Like the 23andMe thing. I'm surprised 23andMe is still around. I'm surprised somebody hasn't sued them or in some way tried to destroy that company. And 23andMe, of course, is like what the DNA swab to see what your ethnic background is, or your nationality, or where you came from, kind of thing. And more guys, as they do that, they're finding out that the children that they've had aren't actually their kids. But there's no consequences for that. Well, no real consequences. Most guys can't enforce those consequences, or there should be consequences. The ones that should be there, they don't. Why is it that medical professionals are not allowed to inform a quote unquote father when they know that genetically that child is not actually his? They will say it's because they don't want it's the Duluth model of feminism, right? There's the potential that the guy will become enraged and beat the woman or kill the child or whatever. That's the concern. And so the practice is that we don't tell men about genetic cuckoldry. We don't want to say anything because we're worried that it could be the most passive guy in the world. We're not going to say anything about it. But it's not really that, is it? I mean, there's certainly a potential for that. I'm not going to say there isn't. But it's really more about provisioning. It's really more about resource transfer at this stage of the game. But why would that even be a thing? Why wouldn't you be able to tell the man? Why is it the priority keeping the woman secret and not the priority being making men aware that they're not actually the parent, the actual biological parent? And you know why? Because we're in a gynocentric social order. If you don't think that we are, there's many, many examples of it. That's probably one of the most egregious ones, I think, I've heard guys will tell me this, and I don't know if this is a black pill thing or a MGTOW, maybe it's an MRA thing, that every live birth should have an automatic DNA test right when the child is born. And women would lose their minds. No, we can't do that. Oh, what are you insecure in your masculinity? Like, there's the shame, right? There's the ridicule. There's the, how dare you? When they say, how dare you? What they're saying is, how dare you challenge the gynocentric social order? That's what they're asking. That's what they're actually saying. How dare you? Because that's a means of control. That's a means of affecting a woman's, optimizing, let's say, a woman's hypergamy. And now that's one way. That's one way we confuse. Like, there's primates, of course, confuse parentage all the time, particularly when it comes to like concealed estrus. And it just depends on like is it chimps, is it bonobos, is it silverback gorillas, is it like macaque monkeys, whatever. There is a biological evolutionary interest for female primates, and really even other animals too. I shouldn't just say primates, to keep it secret that the child is not theirs, because of course what happens is that a new rival alpha comes in and kills off the kids, right? And then of course sends them into estrus, and we start the reproductive process all over again. But there's an interest for women to want to keep that away from men, to prioritize, to legislatively prioritize women's mating strategy before men's. And I mean that in the most long-term sense as possible. Like, to have kids is to have a whole nother generation. So we prioritize, we've said, particularly once we put women into positions of legislative power, that's what women do, is the first thing that they do is change the game for themselves. How can we make it so we don't have to worry about bad reproductive decisions? Well, we're for choice. Choice for what? Choice to have a fail-safe if we make a bad reproductive decision, meaning we got pregnant, whatever the consequence, whatever the circumstances of you getting pregnant. Man, we can do a whole show on those things. But the fact of the matter is that abortion is there to absolve women, or to be a fail-safe for bad reproductive decisions. That's the latent purpose of it. Strip away all this emotional veneer. That's the function of it. Well, she got raped. Okay, well, that wasn't your fault, but it was a bad reproductive decision, right? Maybe you didn't make the decision. Maybe the decision was made for you. But the fact of the matter is that that's why it exists. So, when women get into power, when they come into some sort of like legislative power, political power, social power, in some ways, the first order of business is to find a way to get to security, to get to long-term security, and to force men into to facilitating that security, whether that's through resource transfer or that's through forcing men to do certain things. Dalrock had and I think I've said this on a few occasions, Dalrock had a really great quote one time, and he said that and I use this in book 4, he said, we have moved from a marriage-based model of raising children to a child support-based model of raising children. And that's where we find ourselves in 2020 right now. You want to see the kids running rampant in the streets? That's the result of that. That is exactly the result of that, because it's like it's single parents, and the first thing out of anybody's mouth whenever you see a kid that is like delinquent or is in some way criminal, you see these kids, whether they're Antifa or whatever it is, they're running rampant and just going wild in the streets and tearing things up. What's the first thing people say? Where are these kids' dads? Where's his dad? What happened to his dad? Right? The guy is he's conveniently not there, right? He's the responsible party. The woman's not the responsible party. She's just doing the best she can. Okay. But the thing is that superfluousness of the father is, well, he's good to have around, but we don't want him around until we need somebody to blame, until we need to say, well, why is he a drug addict? Why is he lashing out? Why is he in jail? Why is she, why does she have daddy issues? Why is she selling her butt on OnlyFans? All of those things, the first thing out of our mouth, where's your dad? What's your dad? What's your dad? What does your daddy think? You're some man's daughter. You're some man's son. We don't look at how we got to the point where the man was removed. Or maybe he removed himself, but we don't, or incentivized anyways to remove himself. But we don't look at those, and we'll never have that hard, rational, reasonable look at why those guys are not there. We'd rather look at it from an emotional state. It's easier because it feels better, and we get better vibes and feels before reels, man. We get a better vibe from women telling us like, oh, I tried so hard and I worked 4 jobs and I'm again, fine, good, but you're using and I've brought this up before, you're using the masculine responsibility versus masculine authority. You can say, well, where's that man at? Where's that father at? Why isn't he here? What this, you raised your kid wrong. Well, I didn't have the authority to do that. I didn't have, certainly not the legal authority. And I'll talk about that. I'll talk about responsibility versus authority here a little bit, but I want to sort of finish my thought about paternity here, because what I've seen up to this point, societally, let's just say, is we've done a couple of things. The first one is we've disempowered and we've removed the men systematically from the family, whether that's through, like I said, the Duluth model of feminism, whether that's through child support, like being the new model of raising children, all that stuff. I'm not saying, well, every woman's a welfare queen. Don't go to binaries on me, okay? If you go to binaries on me, like, hang up now, because there's a lot of stuff. It's complex. You have to follow where, how we got from post sexual revolution era fempowerment to 2020 era fempowerment. So it's not just binary. It's not just, oh, well, men are just assholes and women are just great. You'll hear that in the churches, but you're not going to hear that here. Okay. So we have to sort of look at things from a rational, reasonable perspective. And when I look at, like, say, the Duluth model of feminism, when I look at, how men are always the aggressors, no matter what. If you go and you look at the state of gender dynamics or gender affairs, I don't know, whatever, gender politics, certainly in India right now, you could see it in, I think, probably its worst form right now. I follow that pretty closely, by the way. I think maybe a lot of people don't know that about me. I do follow gender politics and things that are going on in India and parts of Southeast Asia as well, because I realize what's happening with the men with respect to marriage and men getting together and forming families. It's a systematic destruction of it. And people want to say it's this big Svengali cabal of guys that are trying to, I don't know who are trying to, destabilize a family and destroy the world. Oh, we'll talk about that later, but that doesn't work unless men are men and women are women. It doesn't work unless we have our particular gender nature. So, I wanted to talk about the paternity issue here really quickly, because when it comes to the existential fear, there's 2 ways that women can get around the cuckoldry thing. The first one is, like I said, obscuring masculinity. It's obfuscating. It's blurring, muddying the waters. Let's say to say, well, you can be whatever you want to be as a man. You don't have to be, a bodybuilder and these caricatures, these cartoon masculinity, beer and boobs masculinity, which is what they want you to, which is what a fempowerment narrative would like you to believe. So there's that side of it. And then there is what I call retroactive and proactive cuckoldry. Retroactive cuckoldry is pretty much what women are doing right now. It is the Sandbergian plan of hypergamy. It is date all the bad boys, bang all the bad boys, have sex, and have your fun in your 20s and your, what I've always said, your party years, right? In the foam cannon party in Cancun. And then once you get to your Epiphany Phase, 29 to 31, it's time to cash out and get off the carousel and have and find that guy who's going to be a good supporter. He's going to be a good father to the children that you had with the hot alphas that maybe you were a little bit careless about. Or maybe you weren't. Maybe you were actually those are the guys you wanted to have sex with, and those were the guys that you wanted to be impregnated by. But they're not the best providers. You couldn't balance the hypergamous equation with those fun guys in the foam cannon party in Cancun. You could with the guy who's learned to code or did a lot with the betas in waiting, but they're not as fun and they're not as good in bed, or they're not as hedonistically id satisfying rather than ego id satisfying. And so what happens is that facilitates we see this socially right now, is it facilitates this child support based way of raising children. So, my baby daddy is this guy, but the guy who stepped up, the dad who stepped up is this guy. He's not the stepdad. He's the guy that stepped up. He's the guy. Technically what that means is you're the guy who is paying for the parental investment responsibilities of the guy that she reproduced with before you were even in the picture, before she even knew what your name was. And you've decided that that's a noble and an ennobling way of really solving your reproductive problem. So if you're one of these guys, and I get this every time I give this sort of speech, sermon, whatever it is, guys run me up the flagpole. They will say, well, I'm a stepdad, or they'll have a shirt like you get a shirt for stepdad's day, dad. And you're great. And my other dad is a jerk. Well, that jerk is who your mom chose to reproduce with. And thus you are here, young lady, young man. But what happens is we as a society, we reinforce the idea of retroactive cuckoldry. And we do that through step-parents. We do that through particularly stepfathers. Now you say, well, what about women who take on the responsibility of other? In those cases, it's a very rare case where there is a single father. Okay. I'm not saying it's not impossible. It does happen. I think it's 86 or 87% of women get legal custody of the children, or at least they're the primary custodians of the child. And maybe 15 to 17% of guys get it. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does, but it's the exception to the rule, let's just say. So yeah, there can be stepmothers as well. I get it. And that's a whole nother dynamic. But what I'm saying right now is, particularly on Father's Day, when we want to reward and reinforce guys, and what's the narrative, what's the message that we want to hammer home every Father's Day? Men need to do more. Men need to be responsible. Men need to measure up. It's always Father's Day is always a reminder to men in general, not just fathers, but fathers in specific, but men in general. You need to do more. You need to do better. Burden of performance. We got you. Burden of performance. Yeah, you do actually have a burden of performance, and women are happy to remind you of that because they realize that you don't have any authority, or not any legal authority anyways. You can say, well, in my religion, we have, women are supposed to submit to us. Well, okay, that's great. It only flies so far until that woman decides that she wants to cash out with cash and prizes and take the kids or whatever. Your kids are never yours. Not in a globalized gynocentric social order. And they never will be until that changes to greater or lesser degrees. We'll see. But when it comes to paternity, men have been trained for the last 4 generations to devalue their paternal instincts. I think I mentioned this. Maybe it was Wednesday or maybe it was the week before, when I was talking about innate evolutionary firmware, right? For revulsion and for getting away from something. Remember I was talking about how that turning into the skid? Do you remember that talk? And how we have to train ourselves to turn into the skid when we're in a skid in a car, and the car rights itself, and we're good. Or martial arts, we don't want to actually get into a fight, but if we have to, we want to make sure that we're okay when we are. So we have to train out our natural sort of fight or flight, and then stand our ground kind of thing, or to be confident enough in our martial arts or whatever it is to defend ourselves. Well, that's training, and you're training away from that instinct. The same thing applies towards training out the instinct for men to be concerned with their own paternity. So when we look at a woman and we say, oh, that woman, I can say it now, well, that woman's a slut, right? That woman, women will use this all the time. It's their way of intrasexual combat. They will say, well, you don't want to get with that woman. That woman is not a good choice for you, reproductive choice, or a good choice for you to solve your reproductive problem with, because she'll cheat on you. She sleeps around. She's the village bicycle, right? She's the girl. She's the good time girl, right? And she won't be a good choice for you to invest your existential fear. It's really an appeal to the existential fear that you won't know whether the child is yours if you get with her, but get with me instead, right? There's really no difference between the two of them, but that's why women will talk catty about each other. That's why gossip is a thing. That's why, because it's a sabotage, right? It's a disqualification of that woman. Well, why would that be a thing in the first place? Because men have an innate dislike or an innate revulsion or an innate sort of avoidance of things that are not good for them, right? Like we want to get away from a dead body. We want to get away from feces. We want to get away from, get away from certain things. And it's easy when I say, well, a dead body is decaying. It smells like hell and you want to get away from it. That's easy for us to understand. What's harder, more complex for us to understand is why I would say that, like, or why anybody would say it, this is not just my theory here. This is Evo Psych, is why would a guy want to avoid a certain kind of woman? Why would he want to avoid a woman who is morbidly obese? Why would he want to avoid a woman who is not a good reproductive choice for him that he might get cuckolded on? Well, because it's his existential fear. He's basically wasting his life and wasting his resources and his energy, and maybe even legally bound to it, but in this society, but in the past, maybe not. But why would that guy want to invest himself into a bad reproductive choice where he would not be able to determine whether the child was his or is not, whether he's the father or he's not the father? There's going to be a certain kind of revulsion to that. We see that in religion. We see that in art. We see that in poetry. We see that in all kinds of human like ways of conveying messages to guys. And I'm just going to put this into sort of religious terms here right now, because if you go and you can look at the Quran, you can look at Proverbs in the Bible. It tells you to avoid the prostitute. Why? Because she's all you're going to do is get your rocks off, but God forbid you actually reproduce with that woman because you don't know if the kid's yours. She's a bad reproductive choice. So why would you be averse to that? Why would you'd have to train yourself because you want to have sex, right? But there's the aversion side that says, well, she wouldn't be a good mother. But what we're doing right now in our post-sexual revolution era is we're trying to tell guys, or we've done this actually very successfully. I say trying, we've done this very successfully since the early 70s, maybe the mid 70s, somewhere around there, that if you are a guy, a real man, because we've obscured masculinity and we've muddied the waters for masculinity, we made it subjective. If you want to be a real man, though, a real man steps up, and a real man doesn't care if his wife goes and bangs somebody else and has a kid with somebody else. He's a real man. He's secure enough in his masculinity that he'll take over the responsibilities of the guy that she banged. And you know what, Mr. Beta, Mr. whatever you are, Mr. Cuckold, I want to say cuck, right? That's noble. You're supposed to do those things. That's the best thing in the world. You're a hero, mister. You're the man. You're not the stepdad. You're the guy who stepped up. You're the guy who took over the parental investments, responsibilities of another guy that your wife, or maybe before you got there or after you got there, decided that you weren't the guy she wanted to breed with. She wanted to breed with that guy. She wanted to reproduce with that guy. But she wants you to be involved because you're a better provider. You're a dad. You're not a cad. You're a dad. You want to breed with the cads, and women have facilitated it really since the sexual revolution so that they could do that. And as consequence free as they can make it. I won't say it's entirely consequence free because there's always a downside. Guys always might go feral, but as much as they can possibly do it, they've done so socially, politically, legislatively, whatever. So that's what I call retroactive cuckoldry. The woman goes and she has sex and she has the babies with the alphas, and then later she gets with the beta provider, the guy who's the good provider, the guy who's the parentally invested one, the guy who's stable, the guy who's loyal, the guy who thinks that it's noble and ennobling for him to take over the responsibility of a choice that was made before she even knew his name. And we pound that into, we've been doing that since, like I said, the late 70s up to where we are right now. And what that is essentially doing is it's telling generation after generation of men that their paternity means nothing, that they are bad for feeling that, for having that innate drive, for they're bad, evil men. They're insecure because you felt jealousy. Now, this is one of the problems I have, and I said this in the Poly show, one of the problems I have with polyamory right now, quote unquote polyamory, is that the only way it really works is if you can magically find a way to disengage or disqualify, or what's called eroticizing that jealousy aspect. And you want to know why cuckold porn is such a big deal right now? It's because we have generation after generation of men who've been taught that they should get off on that jealousy, that it's fun, that it is arousing, that it is hot to watch their wife or their girlfriend or whatever get railed by another guy, the bull, right? I'm going to be as brutally honest as I can on today's show. They think that you want to know why it's popular? That's why. Because it's taboo, first of all, yeah. But it's that jealousy instinct, and it is something that is, I think, part of men's mental firmware, evolved mental firmware, is to be jealous. And why? Because they want to know the kid's theirs. Oh my God, another guy's banging my wife. That kid might not be mine, but you're still on the hook. That's you. You're on. You can eroticize that till you're blue in the face. It doesn't erase the evolved mechanism, the evolved jealousy. Do you guys remember when Congresswoman Katie Hill from California, Congresswoman from California, and she had to step down. Of course, now she's this big feminist idealist icon. She stepped down because she was in a poly relationship with her husband and God knows who else. Some of her staff. That's one of the reasons why that she had to step down. Like some chick in her, she was, lounging around naked. Well, there's photos. Just put it that way. But the point is that the reason why it came to a head, the reason why she got in trouble, is because the husband got jealous. She started banging another guy. Because we're all poly, right? It's just us getting off. It's all good. It feels good. But just because it feels good doesn't erase the innate jealousy. It doesn't erase that innate revulsion. It doesn't erase that. You can say, well, I guess he just hadn't eroticized his jealousy completely enough. You're not going to, because that jealousy serves a function for guys. It serves a function as a fail-safe for the existential fear of men, which is the baby's not mine. The only deal is the baby has to be mine. I'll provide for you. I'll bang you. I'll protect you. I'll feed you. I'll feed the kid. I'll raise the kid. I just want to know that the kid is mine. And today, really since the sexual revolution, that doesn't matter anymore because we live in a gynocentric social order. So if we do that, if we tell guys long enough that they're heroes for accepting women's mating strategy before their own, remember what I said about the cardinal rule of mating, of sexual strategies. One has to abandon it or one has to compromise it for the other one to succeed. And that works both ways, by the way, I should say that. So if for a man's to succeed, a woman has to sort of abandon hers as well. But in this case, in a gynocentric social order, it's usually the man that's abandoning it because most men, 80% of men, are betas. And I think that's the only way I can do it. Okay, I'll be a stepdad. Oh, I'm 30 years old. I'm 33 years old. The only girl who'll have me has 3 kids from 2 different fathers. That's okay. I've always been told that I'm a superhero if I do that. Okay, sure, I'll do it. Hopefully I'll solve my reproductive problem eventually by having sex with this woman who's already got 3 kids. You want to know why guys I don't have to be the one to tell guys to avoid single mothers because most guys are going to avoid single mothers anyways. It's because of that revulsion. It's because of that innate firmware that says, whoa, she's already been with somebody else. Because for a guy, when it comes to men's mating strategy, the resources are fine. Resources are finite. Men can generate more because we don't have the same rigors for reproduction that women do. But guys still want to know that the kid is theirs. They want it because otherwise everything they're doing is for nothing. If I can't send my genes into the next generation, then what difference does it make? And that's why men get pissed off, because in the past, the guys who got pissed off and killed the woman or killed the kids or killed whatever, those were the guys who sent their genes into the next generation with somebody else. That's why we get jealous. That's why we get envious. That's why we are concerned. That's why guys fixate, like obsessively fixate, when they lose a girlfriend and the girlfriend starts banging another guy and I can't get it out of my head, Rollo. That's why, because there is an innate evolved part of your psyche that has a tough time with that. I'm not saying it's impossible to get over it. It is, and you should. But I understand. I fully empathize with guys who tell me that they can't get over it. So that's the paternity side of things. But what the social side of all this, and this is in relevance to Father's Day, is that on Father's Day we reinforce that narrative. We say it doesn't matter who the dad is. It doesn't matter. In fact, the dad doesn't even have to be female or male. The dad can be female because women can do anything, right? They don't need no man. They can be alpha females. Or, well, you're a superhero, Mr. Stepdad. And again, I don't want to take anything away from you as a guy if that's what you've chosen to do, because some guys will say, they'll throw this at me. They'll say, well, Rollo, I couldn't have kids and I wanted to adopt. Okay, here's the difference between retroactive cuckoldry and you adopting a kid. you were part of that decision-making process. You were the one who put yourself into that. You decided that you wanted to do that, and you went in with both eyes open. Most step parents, that decision is made for them like I said, long before the woman or the man or the baby daddy even knows who you are. And you're just, oh, okay, I'll just do it because, there's a different motivation, I think. It's a different motivation from the guy who thinks it's his masculine, noble duty, Christian duty to feed and provide and house and clothe the children of another guy who she really, wanted to have fun with and reproduce with, and you're the guy who's stepping up. That narrative has been working for a long time, and it's in religion, it's in society, it's in music. Father's Day brings it all to the front, and we can see how we decide what is a father and what is not a father, what is a man and what is not a man. And I should also point this out as well, is like, because generation after generation of men don't know what manhood is, or it's subjective to them. When a woman says, well, a real man does this, they pay attention. Really? Is that what? Okay. How do I get the man badge? How do I get the man merit badge? Well, you got to take care of my kids. You got to be the man who stepped up. You have to be a man, to be a real man for women, particularly in this day and age. To get the man card, to get the man medal, you have to complete her sexual strategy. That's what it is. That's what it comes down to. Complete my sexual strategy. Buy into my bullshit. Buy into the narrative of retroactive cuckoldry. Now, there's proactive cuckoldry, which is, of course, the guy who's already married and the wife goes out and she has sex while she's got the beta and she goes outside, an extramarital affair. Retroactive is when she's already single, has sex, has the babies, and then marries the beta. So those are the two. That's the differences. And I've said this is in book 3. So retroactive versus proactive. Proactive is what guys always consider as cuckoldry. They go, well, real cuckoldry is very, very rare. It's only like it's somewhere between like 5% and 20%. I think it's gone up because of 23andMe and DNA testing. But I've read articles where they'll say, well, it's only women's cuckoldry is really only at 3%, and they really, really love men instead, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't know if that flies, because we can see what was it 42% of children are born out of wedlock. So what does that say? Well, they're not really cuckolds because she already had. Cuckoldry, I think, needs to be, and this is me, I think cuckoldry needs to be defined as a man who's assuming the parental investment responsibilities of another man's child, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly. The nuts and bolts of it, the latent function of it is that woman optimizes her hypergamous mating strategy, and you are on the hook one way or another, whether proactively or retroactively, for parental investment. That's what it comes down to. Does that mean that I think that if you adopted kids that you're a cuck? No, not necessarily. Not as much. This is just me talking. I think that's because you had a choice in it, because you were the one that made the decision to do that. Going in, right? It wasn't made for you, and then you came in. I don't know if that makes sense. Guys who have, like, for instance, a woman has kids with two different fathers, right? You come in and you're the third guy. Maybe she's not married to, but you're the guy that's the man who stepped up. The decisions to have those kids that was made before. Now you can say the same thing about the adopting, but adopting usually comes from a different place. Like guys, step in. I want to be a father. Like guys will come to me and say, "You're the father I never had." Well, okay, cool. I'm glad. I'll be happy to be that for you. But I'm more concerned with like how you build yourself. What are you going to do with what I look at myself more as an educator. I know guys like to say, well, you're the godfather of the red pill. I try to be more of an educator than anything else. But I think there's a qualitative difference between the guy who is put into the position of being a stepfather and then the guy who says with his wife, hey, I can't have kids. You can't have kids. Okay, I'm going to adopt. We're going to adopt. That's a different thing. So anyways, there's that. That's the paternity section of today's topic. Let me hit a few of these real quick. This is I notice instead of Happy Father's Day, some are posting girl dad. Yeah, that's because women and men, like this generation of kids, right? This generation of young men and young women are looking for a father figure for sure. We covered this on Rule Zero a while back. I think we did a show called like, Are You My Father? And we were talking about how certain guys, like say Jordan Peterson's an easy example, they serve as sort of father figures, or this I don't want to say dominant masculine, but this sort of this want for a good, knowledgeable, invested, emotionally invested, and intellectually invested man who has their best interests in mind. Because, and you know why that is. You know why there's that want. Well, first of all, there's a natural evolutionary want for that, but there's the reason for that is, I think, is because in spite of all of this negativity that has been thrown at men and thrown at fathers for going on 5 decades right now, the idea of a beneficent guy is something that's still appealing amongst all of the messaging that men are bastards and men are evil and masculinity is toxic and everything else. For all of that, for all of the want for a guy who is, for all of the want of a guy, amongst all of that, young men and young women are looking for that father figure. That's why we call them the Lost Boys generation. It's mostly guys right now. I thought it was funny when Jordan Peterson came around and he started like things with like, they were very responsible, like, oh, make your bed and stand up straight and, wash your hair and like stuff that my generation would have just been like, what the hell is this all about? Like, for my generation, it was all about rebellion. It was all about like punk rock and heavy metal and speaking your mind and going out there. And we had kind of, I guess from a musical sense, we sort of had an outlet for our angst, our teenage angst, but it was always against something. It was always like, it was a teenage rebellion. It's been the same way since forever, really. But I mean, you think about like the 1950s and the greasers and the preppies and all that other stuff. And there's always going to be that. And I think that we've kind of corrupted that over the last, like, I don't know, probably like certainly the last 2 generations, if not the last 3. Let's see, what else do I got here? Davy Furtado, I probably missed you, but I'm going to back up a little bit here and see if I can catch you. No, I don't have you. Sorry, my bad. Davy Furtado says, if I ask a girl out for a date and she rejects me once, how many more times should I ask her before moving on? 0. You ask her for a date. What you're throwing at me, Davy, whatever your name is the perseverance question, which is how long should I stick it out? If you're rejected for a date, move on. That's a rejection. You rejected. You lose. You lose, sir. You lose. Take it on the chin and learn from it and move on. Figure out what you did. Figure out why do you think you got rejected? Really? Don't stick it out. Like I keep saying, how many times do I got to say this? I mean, I made it into an iron rule. Iron rule number 7, never root through garbage once you have taken the garbage to the curb, right? So let's just be friends. I don't know what the situation was, Davy, but if it's a rejection, if you're saying I got rejected, how many times should I ask her out? Don't. Move on. You're moved on. That's okay. That's the good news. The good news is you're moving on, and there's no shame. There's no nothing. Why do you feel bad about it? I don't know that you do, but a lot of guys feel bad about it. Why? Don't feel bad. Move on. Move on now. That's when should I move on? Now. When's the best time to plant a tree? 30 years ago. When's the next best time? Right now. Move. Concerned Citizen says, what do you think of fathers being present during childbirth? I was there. I was present during my daughter's birth. Is that a religious thing? I don't know. Maybe that's something I need to ask Abu American or my Muslim friends. Is that something like you can't be in the room? Like you're not supposed to watch your woman give birth, or Jewish thing. I don't know. I'm not sure if it's a religious thing. I'm glad I was there. I'm glad I got to watch what happened. I whenever somebody asks me about this, I think of this comedy skit, and I can't remember the guy who said this, but it was a comedian, stand-up comedian one time, and I forget who the comedian was, but they asked the guys, or he was asked about what he thought, like, was he there for the birth, like when the child was born? And he goes, yeah, I was there. And he goes, well, what did you think? What did it feel like for you? So he said, it was like watching my favorite pub burn down. As in, like, you know, like he liked having sex with that, and now it's gone, you know. But I it is what it is, man. It's the human body. It's women's bodies. It's men's bodies. I wish I could. I was not able to actually cut the umbilical cord because the cord was wrapped around my daughter's neck, and they had to like do it themselves. But it was cool. It was cool to watch my kid come out and see a new human being be made, I guess, or pop out into a new world. And she didn't cry all that much. It was really weird. I mean, she cried a little bit, you know, but not even a real cry, right? Just like, and she had like really liquid blue eyes. I think most kids do, I guess, or whatever. Then her hair looked like a Brillo pad, like steel wool. I was like, what the hell? And then, God, I should show you a picture of my daughter I have lots of them when she was born, not at the actual birth, but like after she was born. And it's weird. It is a life-changing experience, I think, for most guys. I think obviously it has to be a life-changing experience, but I think in a sense that like you're seeing yourself like replicated. Like my daughter, I saw my daughter yesterday. She's not here right now, but like I saw her yesterday for Father's Day, and it's weird to me because like she graduated from college from her bachelor's degree this year. She's going on to get her master's, but when I see her, I see me. I think maybe that's the weirdest part because she looks a lot more like me, I think. Well, I mean, she looks like both me and my wife, but I think if you're going to say she looks like one or the other, she looks more like me. And it's weird. I don't know, maybe it's kind of like, I never thought I would think that, like you cloned yourself. It's not that, because she's her own person, but I see a lot of her mother's traits in her, and I see a lot of my traits in her. And it's strange I don't think that most people really have, like, I didn't anyways. I didn't consider that I would have another human being that has similarities to me, because we're always told from, well, you're a unique snowflake individual. Yeah, for the most part. But when it comes to like your influences and how things sort of shape you, I guess. But there's also a lot of biological determinism that goes on in it too. Another thing I've been researching recently is how the effects of like genetics and inheritability, let's just say, of like things like personality, IQ, creativity, whatever, like things that we don't really think of as necessarily being sort of heritable, but there's a lot of study in it right now, and I don't think that it necessarily has to be a bad thing to consider this, because I think most people really realize it. Certainly fathers do, or certainly I'll tell you what's funny. Let me give you one more story real quick. I'll give you a dad story here. When my daughter was born, I don't know why I thought this, because here I am like, well, what was I? I was 30 years old, right, when my daughter was born. And my overwhelming concern was to stay by the child, stay by the baby the whole time. So I don't care where the baby went. I was always like deadly scared or concerned, or maybe I was more protective or whatever, but I wanted to make sure that I watched that kid go from being in sort of like the French fry warmer, to over being, to washing her off and all this stuff they have to do, like sort of after the baby comes out. Cause it's not just a baby that comes out. There's a lot of other crap that comes out too. That's pretty nasty. But as they're doing all that, I was laser focused on my daughter being in, where she was. And I stuck with her from the time she came out of the womb to the time she was wrapped up and handed to my wife. And I don't know why it was just a sort of this obsessive impulse to and I never experienced something like that before. I don't, like people say, well, you were worried that she was going to get stolen. Nah, not so much that, but just like you want to be there in case somebody starts something, I guess. I don't know. It was strange. Let's see. Who is this? This is Mellow. I do have some other, I have a few other things I want to cover, but I am going to catch up here real quick. Mellow Mentoring says, I often hear women say they were young and dumb and they smartened up and got with a better guy, the beta. What would you say to women who say that? I would say you are in the midst of your epiphany phase. That's what every woman says. And that is a convenience that is afforded to women in gynocentric social orders. You're new around here. I would say you're new around here. That is what we call it. That's what I've called a term, the epiphany phase. It's the time between, say, around 29 to 31 years old when a woman, I really should probably just do a full episode on the epiphany phase. 29 to 31 years old, where women sort of decide for themselves that this is when their biological clock is ticking. When they find God, when I want to get back to living right. I've had my fun. You'll see this always. I was just joking about this with Rich Cooper. You'll see this in Tinder profiles or dating profiles. Oh, I'm 32 and I've had my fun. So no fun for you. Or I'm done with the jerks and the bad boys. I used to be into them, but now I'm not. I'm into you. Okay. Why now? Why? Well, because women are checking out. Their party years are over. They cannot compete. I'm going to do. I'm writing right now a sort of an update for. It should be up by tomorrow or maybe Tuesday on the Rational Mail. I need to also do a little bit of housekeeping, but I'll save that for later. But I'm doing my next essay is actually on the wall revisited, I think, and how it interacts with the epiphany phase. Because I think a lot of guys simply, they think that the wall is the big get even, or else they think that it doesn't exist. It's always like one or the other. It's always this binary thing. And what the wall really is a woman sort of mentally and psychologically acknowledging that she cannot compete at the same level of like sexual competition that she used to when she was 22, that she does at 32. And so there's a whole slew of mental gymnastics and social conventions that are there to sort of facilitate women moving from being, young and dumb, like you said, to being, I've matured and I'm a different person now and I'm doing things the right way. I'm going to make you wait 4 dates before we have sex, or I'm going to make this guy, this beta, jump through all these hoops to prove to me he's the one. That's all planned. That's all a part of the plan. Whether it's intentional or it's not, it's still part of the plan. There's your answer. How you like that? What else do we have here? I guess I'll do a few more of these. Hang on. Oh, cool. I can catch up. Here we go. Brandon Putnam says, Rollo, I found the Red Pill and your book series after surviving a relationship breakup with a BPD woman. Okay, first of all, was she really a BPD, which is borderline personality disorder? I'm recovering natural blue pill alpha and promise keeper. Keep fighting the good fight. I will. What's a promise keeper? A promise keeper is this, and a lot of guys get this confused, and this is my fault too. I wrote a post way back in 2012, 2013 called Promise Keepers. And the reason I wrote this, and this is a good topic because this is certainly a Father's Day topic. A promise keeper is this. I had a guy, and I've had several guys, young men usually, and they will hit me up and they'll say, well, Rollo, I never wanted to be like my dad. My dad was a bastard. He was an alcoholic. He abused my mother. He was a bad man. It doesn't even, whether it's true or not, right? It's just, he was a bad man. And I swore to myself at 15 years old, that I would never be like my old man. I never wanted to be like him. And of course, mothers of sons, single mothers of sons would love to emphasize this because they want that guy. They want their sons, like guys ask me, this is another question. Guys will say, well, how come women, mothers, turn their sons into such pussies? How come they turn their sons into beta males, into providers? How come they reinforce the idea of being sort of like that provider, like beta in waiting that I was just talking about at the Epiphany Phase? How come mothers do that? And wouldn't they want them to be alphas? No. They what most mothers do, particularly if they were married to a guy or they got busy with a guy and had a baby with that guy, and he was the alpha that she couldn't lock down. A lot of times women get very resentful, very frustrated, very angry, long-term grudge. Women will hold a grudge way longer than any guy will. And that's, again, part of the sort of the communication psychology of women, but they'll hold a grudge on us, particularly against a guy, all the time, because that's a source of indignation. Even just thinking about it is enough to sort of trigger the squirt, about the guy who did her wrong. Oh man, you know what? When I talk about stuff like this, I hate getting sidetracked because it makes me think of this one video that I just saw recently. But anyways, so what happens is those women try to turn their sons, if they have a son, into the guy that the alpha never could be. They believe, for whatever reason, that, well, I want my son to be a feminist. I want him to be a good human. Boys will be boys. No, boys will be good humans. I'm going to take him to the Pussy Hat March. And I'm not saying all women do this. I'm just saying that there is, I think, an instinctual side of women, because women, when it comes, particularly after they've had a child and they become mothers, once a woman becomes a mother, I think there's something that psychologically switches in a woman. And it goes more, the women tend to lean more towards the security side of things. Now, maybe that changes later on once the child gets a little bit older and everything. But when a woman has an infant child, or she has a young child, let's say maybe a toddler, or maybe as old as like 7 years old, when we have a child that's young, very young, there's a need for protection, or I think there's a psychological, like a lizard brain need for protection or security, or a want for somebody who's going to drive the bus, right? To take control. They're just looking for that's why I think a lot of beta guys fit that bill, the good dad, whether it's the stepdad or whatever. They lean towards that because women are the vulnerable sex. I didn't say weaker. I said they're the vulnerable sex. Evolutionarily speaking, they were the ones who were basically helpless, particularly when they had young children. So there's a want for that security. And I think that's sort of a long-term enduring thing for women. Really, when you look at hypergamy, when you look at alpha seed and beta need, the beta need side is all based on long-term security. How can I ensure my survival and the survival of my offspring? And rightly so, because that's what made us great, right? The human species. And so what I think happens is when that woman has that child and there is no guy to provide that security, she says, men are unreliable, men are ridiculous, men are toxic, men are effeminate, or men are selfish bastards, men are angry, men are this. Because they can't get that security from the guy that they mated with, and now he's gone because she made a bad reproductive decision, right? So what they do is they take that and they put that into the child. They put that into they want the son to be the man that the father couldn't be to her, which is the guy she couldn't lock down. She can't lock down him. He's a bastard. He's an alcoholic. He's a son of a bitch. But you're not going to be that way, because mommy's going to make sure that it's that, was that Pink Floyd song, mama's going to put all her fears into you. Remember that? It was Off the Wall, Off the Wall, right? In fact, I think the song was named Mother. You want a Red Pill song? There's your Red Pill song. Look up Mother off of Pink Floyd, The Wall. There you go. Mama's going to put all her fears into you. Mama's going to make all your nightmares come true, or what? I don't know what it is. It's like this idea that maybe women aren't doing it on purpose. They're doing it because they're looking for that security. And what happens in a gynocentric social order is a guy, the young man, the 15-year-old, the 17-year-old, that 20-year-old makes that his life's mission, because he sees that as sort of his beta game. His way of identifying with women is to protect mom. And why not? There's a natural protector instinct, I would say. And particularly when it comes to sister, it comes to mom, whatever, kin affiliation. I'm not saying that there's not an evolutionary aspect to it. There certainly is. But what happens is that guy makes that his life mission. And then what happens is he gets into a relationship with another woman and he's 23 or he's 24. And yet he feels like he wants to cheat on her because she's not like his ideal, or she won't do things, or she's a bitch, or she, whatever, for whatever reason. If the guy is having trouble with his girlfriend, he thinks what I think psychologically, what promise keeper guys do, promise keeper young men, is they have that conflict. They have a, like for men, cognitive dissonance is a real thing. Not so much for women, but as it is for men. And when it comes to women, hypergamy sort of balances everything out from the point of cognitive dissonance. For men, it's different. So this is why I wrote that essay, because I had guys who said that they wanted to cheat on their girlfriends, or they did cheat on their girlfriends, and they feel horrible about it because now they feel like they let mom down, or they feel like they let themselves down because they made a promise to themselves that they would never be like their old man. This is a great Father's Day topic here, because these guys, their model, their imprint, let's say, their imprinting of masculinity and fatherhood and what it means to be a man, what it means to be is all based on a negative stereotype and a negative model, which is dad's a bastard. And then, female teachers probably reinforce that for that guy. Hate your own gender. It's worse to be a man than men have lots of responsibilities. And if you're not living up to them, then you're a bad person, and you're not a good human because you're male. You have a penis. There's something wrong with you. So it's your duty to keep getting better and qualify constantly. And then what happens is when that guy cheats on his girlfriend, or that guy finds like he's more into this girl than that girl, that causes a lot of internal struggle for that guy. And it gets even worse if that guy's never had another positive, conventionally masculine man around to help him deal with that emotionally, because men process emotions, particularly negative emotions, differently than women do. That's a biological fact. It's a neurological fact. Men process emotion differently than women. Like I said, emotion, instinct, emotion, reason. Instinct, reason, emotion. And so when guys are saying, well, you need to express yourself, they come to me and they go, I can't believe I did that. What's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. You were just simply brought up in a gynocentric social order, and you're a promise keeper. Unlearn what you have learned. It's not impossible. You just have to, you have to unplug yourself. You have to go from being blue pill to red pill. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing bad about you. I mean, you decide for yourself what, it's nothing wrong with wanting to protect your mom or wanting to, to be a good guy. Nothing wrong with that until that devotion to that promise, that commitment to being that way, it conflicts with your own best interests. So maybe dad's not such an asshole. Maybe dad, I've said, and I'm sort of echoing Tom Likas here, but Tom Likas on his terrestrial radio show used to say this. He would say, on Father's Day, call your dad, talk to him. Even if you think he's the worst son of a bitch on planet Earth, it will be cathartic to talk to him and say, oh, okay, I guess he's a son of a bitch. But talk to your dad from a red pill perspective. With your red pill lens on, and say, was dad really the asshole that mom made him out to be all this time? How am I like dad? And not just how am I like him personally, but how am I as a man, as a conventionally masculine man, an objective definition of masculinity instead of my made up, 68 genders. How do I compare? How does my life look like? Is he really a bad person? It might be. He might actually be an alcoholic son of a bitch, right? How did he get that way? Ask yourself. I'm not saying forgive these guys. I probably should have started the show with this disclaimer here, because whenever you talk about men's issues, whenever you talk about fatherhood, I've talked about this before. I could probably do a full TED talk on the war on paternity. That's what really that last part was about paternity. I wrote an essay. You'll see it. It's in the description. The essay about the war on paternity. The first thing you always have to kind of put the caveat out there, or disclaimer, I guess, is that whenever you say anything as a guy, whenever I discuss this, there will be women who are just sort of outside my sphere. They're outside the manosphere. They're outside. They're not red pill wear. They're still stuck in blue pill. Or you got these guys who will say, "Hey, you need to go listen to Rollo." They're blue pill guys who still are, they don't know any better, or they think I'm a son of a bitch, or they think that what I'm talking about is just too uncomfortable for them to actually like process and consider. And the reason why they're averse or they don't want to listen is because it sounds like I'm complaining. It sounds like I'm making men into victims. I'm not making men into victims. What I'm doing is I'm trying to objectively see the mechanics and the latent purpose of all the stuff that's happening, right? Promise keepers. What's the latent purpose of that? And when I say go, or Tom Likas says, go and talk to your dad and see if he's actually figured out. Is how did he become the person that he is? Was it because he's shirking his responsibilities, or was it because he was removed from the household? Maybe he tried his best and you still think he's a son of a bitch because mommy bought into the men are pigs line and put that into you. Mama's going to put all of her. I should have put that as the song in here, but I have to make the disclaimer before I talk about, I didn't do it this one, but I should, because the first thing anybody's going to say when they listen to this and they read me or whatever is, he's bitter. There's something wrong with that guy. Who hurt you? What was wrong with you? And the reason why you get that response is because men are not allowed to complain. We're not allowed to be the victim. I get this from guys who are like the TradCon power dad, hacks. Well, you sound like you're complaining. I'm not complaining. You sound like you're making men aren't victims. How dare you? Men rule the world. No, they don't. Go read The Myth of Male Power. But the emotional response from Mr. TradCon, Mr. Power Dad, is still the reflexive binary response is, you sound like you're complaining. How dare you? Don't complain. You're a man. Get up there and do something. It's one of the reasons why we have separate standards of justice for men and women, because we expect men to make more of themselves. We expect men, and people throw rocks at me all the time when I say this, but I say men must become women just are. How dare you? I can't believe you said that. But yet they'll still say, how dare you call men victims? Well, if that's the case, and if it's a separate standard of justice for men and for women, and I don't mean that just in terms of like legal justice, I mean like in how we're living our lives. What we expect from a man is something that's different. We expect something different from a woman. What's extraordinary for a woman is everyday and average for a man. So why is that? Because men have a burden of performance. But for me to say, well, men have issues, men have these things, here's what's going on in the gynocentric social order. Here's how we got to the point where, young men are running around rioting in the streets. Well, it must be their dads. Well, doesn't that imply that those dads had a burden of performance? Does it mean that they should have been, it's when it comes to, I'll say TradCons, but when it comes to that kind of mindset, it's all based on personal responsibility. Well, if they would just done what they're supposed to do, you need to be responsible. Yeah, you do. But today, men don't have authority that is commensurate with that responsibility. And for me to even say that, the first thing out of people's mouth is, well, what are you talking about? Men have authority. They have authority from God. They have authority from this. Men rule the world. Men, it's all old boys and they run the companies and they do this. It's a man's world. It's a man's world with women behind the scenes directing where men are going to go. Why is it that women, and this is pretty obvious, I think, why is it that women are the primary consumers in Western societies, and not just the United States? It's like Western, globalized, exported Western, gynocentrism. Why is it that women are the primary consumers? And shouldn't men be also at least equally, directing where their money's going to go and deciding what the family's going to do, or what kind of car they're going to drive, what vacation they're going to take, and all this stuff? If it's a man's world, then why is it that women seem to be directing the course of all that wealth and all of that, all that decision making? I can show you the stats. Was it 90% of all the decisions? Was it 90% of all the financial decisions throughout the course of a family's like existence or whatever are made by women? And that was as of 2018. I quoted that stat in book 4. So if it's a man's world, then why? Well, because men have a burden of performance and women are the ones that are behind the scenes making the decisions for these guys because they think that they'll get the man merit badge if they do those things. So anyways, I want to talk about authority and responsibility, but I'm going to do that after I get to the rest of these. Ponderosa Bear says, this generation is rebelling. Yeah. They are rebelling against the chaos of the anything goes of single mothers. I don't know how you came to that particular idea. I don't think that this generation is necessarily rebelling. I think they're out there acting out. I don't know. I think it just depends on sort of what demographic you're talking about. The anything goes of single mothers. That to me sounds like black pill right there. That sounds to me like MGTOW. Well, MGTOW, maybe not, most certainly black pill. Well, we're gonna put a stop to single mothers. No, you're not. Everything until we have a systemic crash, until everything falls apart, you're not going to change jack shit. There'll be some new OnlyFans. Like there'll be some new technology that facilitates it that much more. And you know who'll be the guy, be making the money off of it? Another dude, a guy. Because smart guys understand this is all about emotions and they're profiting off of it. There's no, you want to talk about the truly noble guy is the guy who sees that and puts a stop to that. The guys who see as an OnlyFans, or he realizes he could do something about it. He could do something for the betterment of the world. He could do something for the betterment of men and women, and puts a stop to it or raises. I don't think you're going to have any sort of systemic change until everything crashes. And I've really kind of resisted that idea for a long time. I still have, I've always said, like the pendulum swings kind of back and forth, and sometimes the pendulum just falls off the freaking clock, and maybe that's where we're headed right now. What did you say? Thomas, thank you for my five British pounds of Happy Father's Day to you, Thomas Pierre. I will have a cup of tea. It's coffee, cup of tea. Pip, pip, cheerio. All right. Jared, thank you. Thank you, Jared. Let's get to the rest of these real quick because I'm terribly behind. Ponderosa Bear again. Specifically, the Jordan Peterson crowd is rebelling against the single mom's chaos. Are they? Are they? How are they rebelling? By what? By cleaning up their room? By washing their penises? Benises? Where the hell did that come from? Who the fuck came up with Benis? Are we like 12 years old? Yeah, I mean, I see what I think is interesting about the Jordan Peterson phenomenon, and I think it's over. If this was, gosh, I hate to stutter so much. If this was 2017 or 2018, remember Jordan Peterson's run was about 18 months. It was about a year and a half, and then that was it. Who knows where he is? Who knows what he's doing? Who cares? Who even cares where he is or what he's doing right now? And I don't mean that to be callous or an asshole. I'm just saying who's thinking? Where's Jordan Peterson? All this? I don't see anybody asking that right now. They probably, is he recovering in Russia right now? So you could have said that. I might have agreed with you for a little while about single moms against chaos. Well, whatever. Guys are still going to be guys, particularly the guys who tend to be more beta, who tend to be on the 80% side of things, who have to figure things out for themselves. Let's see. Oops, sorry, my bad. John, there you are. LB John says, how does the reproductive strategy change between men and women if a single father begins to date a single mother and has a child with her? Okay, well, there's a little bit of a difference right there. Remember that when this is, you're going to say I'm overgeneralizing here, but I'm just going to say it anyways. When women are single mothers, I think that there is something clicks for them instinctually, and they know that they have lost sort of, I won't say intersexual, but they have lost sort of reproductive capital, let's say. So a woman, and I know this sounds really antiseptic and sciencey, but when a woman is single and she's young and she's 22 years old and she's, got the world on her fingertips, right? I mean, that girl is, like I keep saying, the reason they called the store Forever 21 and not Forever 41 is because 21, 22, 23, right around that age, that's the age that every woman that is older than that wants to get back to. They understand that was the apogee, the apex, the peak of their sexual market value. And most of the reasons because they were unspoiled. Why do men want virgins? Why have they always wanted virgins? Why have they always wanted an unspoiled virgin as like the highest value, right? I mean, even the churches would say like the church is the bride of Christ, right? The church it's always like this unspoiled, virginic kind of, perfectly preserved thing because that woman, that virgin woman represents something that a woman who has already had children does not. And that's an evolutionary thing on top of everything else. But so bear that in mind. This is a two-part question here. So bear in mind that a virgin female with no children has always and will probably always be, from our mental firmware perspective, more valuable than a woman who's already had kids. And hear me out, ladies, before you fly off the handle. That is sexual market value. That's not your personal worth. She said I wasn't worth anything. No, I didn't say that. I just said that when men are looking for the ideal virgin bride, or they're looking for the young, fertile young woman who is sexually available and wants, I've said this before, every man wants a slut. He just wants her to be his slut. He wants her to be his personal, he wants her to do whatever he wants him to do. But she also has to be the Madonna whore, right? She has to be the one who's this unspoiled girl who's only into him, who only has eyes for him, who he's the alpha that she's going to always be with. That's why. And why? Because the equation of that guy's existential fear, which is paternity, wanting to know that the kid is his, if the virgin has never known a man before, let's get biblical and Quranic, I guess, has never experienced a man before, men instinctively understand that if I have sex with this girl and she's not with anybody else and she's never been with anybody else before I got there, then I'm pretty sure the kid's mine. And that's why that's, I think, instinctually, hindbrain, lizard brain, whatever, that's why guys opt for that, or they think that. And that's why it's an inherent value. It's innate value. So when a woman already has a child, I'm not saying there's necessarily has to be an aversion to it, but there is men have to get past that revulsion. And I'm using revulsion as scientific terms. I'm not saying, I'm just saying that there's a revulsion aspect, or avoidance. Let's just say that, an avoidance aspect to it, an evolutionary avoidance aspect to it. Because that woman now has a child that is not genetically his. And if he is to get with her, then he must sacrifice something of his own reproductive efforts to do so. So she better be damn good in bed, or there better be some sort of balance there that makes getting with that woman in some way preferable, well, not preferable to virgin, but like in some way solving of his reproductive problem. And it says, well, she's a nice girl. She does this. She'd be a good mother, yada, yada. So there's that aspect. So that's the first side of the question. Now you just asked me this. You said, what if that woman what if the guy has kids already? What about them coming together and having kids? Okay, well, the instinct is still there. For women, I think it's different. And again, men and women are different. They have different mating strategies. They are adversarial to one another, and sometimes they happen to be complements to one another. So when a man has a child, or in some cases a child substitute, we'll get to that in a second, but when a man has a child, that is a form of pre-selection of that guy. Because what it means is, to a woman's mind, to a woman's reproductive, imperative, this guy already got with a woman and reproduced with her. The fact that he has a kid that he is responsible for, maybe he has in your example, has primary custody of, that makes him more valuable. Because now, not only is he's a proven commodity, right? He's got a kid. He cares for the kid. He loves the kid. He'd make a great dad. That's the disconnect. You want to talk about double standards? Here's your double standard. The attraction is, well, he would make a good choice. He'd be a good choice for parental investment because he's already there. It's already there. It's done. Here, look at the kid. He's doing great with the kid, hopefully. And even if not, there's still the impression that he's already a father. So what does that make him? Remember what I said this is that women want a man who other men want to be and other women want to bang. There's a lot more to that than just like, oh, you just want to get laid and pick up artists. No, that's not it. It's women want to get with a guy who other men want to be. So there's admiration, there's status. That is pre-selection. Or I should say social proof. That's social proof. So the guys look up to that person. Guys say this guy's admirable. That other guys have a high opinion. That's really a status question. But also, women want to bang him. They think he's great. In fact, so much so that one woman got with him and had a kid with him. That's pre-selection. So when I say that women want men who other men want to be and other women want to bang, that is the men's side of that is social proof, and the female side of that is pre-selection. So when a woman sees a guy with a single father, and let's just say for sake of argument, he's doing a good job with the single fatherhood thing, he's way more attractive than now. I'm sure you've heard this stereotype, and I don't know how true this is, but like a lot of guys say this. I don't know if this is just BS or wishful thinking or whatever. I've kind of noticed it myself. I did earlier in my marriage, but when you have one of these, you have a wedding ring on, guys will say that, well, women come on to me all the time. Like, remember Chris Rock did that one, he did that one bit, a comedy bit. I think it was back in the late 80s or early 90s, where he's saying that once he got married, like all of his ex-girlfriends or all these girls were coming out of the woodwork to say, hey, me and my girlfriend were having a dick sucking contest and we thought you'd be a good judge, right? Like that. Remember that bit? There's a reason why that's funny, is because guys go, yeah, as soon as I put a ring on, like that I think what's funny is, like, for a lot of guys, particularly guys who beta men who see, who look at sex from a transactional situation, where they think that they're lucky. I'm lucky the girl actually had sex with me. And there's this constant drive and this constant want and this constant, like seeking after, there's something, where they say desperation is a stinky cologne, right? Once you get married and that desperation's gone, women see you as a good, maybe they do, depends on where they are, really. I don't think women in their party years really think this way, but I think when they get to their epiphany phase and maybe after it, they see a guy with a wedding ring, that's pre-selection. So that guy looks a little bit more attractive. Maybe I want to have sex with a married man, right? Maybe I want to steal him, or maybe I want to be a home wrecker. So remember this. What did you say your name was, John? So there's a difference there. For men, when they're looking at a woman who already has a child, instinctively, now I'm not saying socially, not learned wise, but instinctually, there's an aversion to that. There's like, she comes with baggage, and the kid is baggage. And that sounds bad, but I'm putting that in terms of she has responsibilities. There's that woman. Okay, don't call it baggage. It sounds so bad. Oh, if you just change your tone. Okay, well, we're going to tolerate. Oh, she has a liability. The liability is that child. The child is always going to come first. Not me. I'm never going to come first. And we say that all that. There's so many social conventions that say, well, your kids have to come first. It's a cult of the child, right? Everything has a priority, is prioritized by what's the best interest of the child. Well, she has to come first. Not you. I'm done having my fun. Fun time's over. I just need you to be responsible. Fuck you. No. And I don't think enough guys who would get into that situation, because I think most guys who would be in that situation, I don't necessarily have to be alpha or beta, but I think most guys who see that as a sort of a good idea to get with a single mother, even though that they have a kid themselves, I think that they don't realize, or they're probably already sort of primed to accept that the child of the girl that they're with, or the single mommy that they're getting involved with, is going to be with that child is going to come before him. And they're, it's okay. It's the way it should be. No, it shouldn't be. I'll tell you this right now. This is whether you, and thanks for that question. Whether you have kids, whether you don't have kids, you want a secret to marriage success? Here's your Father's Day marriage success story. If you're going to get, or even into, you don't have to get married, get in a long-term relationship. If you're going to get into any relationship with that woman, with any woman, frame is where everything starts. It has to be your frame. She has to want to be with you. Genuine desire and frame are the key, and polarity are the keys to a healthy relationship. So if you can't get that, or if your preconception is, well, she's going to be with the kid comes first, guess what? You're out of your frame. Guess what? You're not her first. There's something mitigating her desire for you. Guess what? You're not number one, and you never will be number one. You'll never be the primary focus of that woman. And I will tell the same thing to women too, is if you don't make your man the number one thing in your life, the number one desire in your life, to the exception of your own your own biological children with your husband who you've had with that guy, if you don't prioritize your relationship and your frame with that guy, you will not have as successful or as healthy a relationship with that guy. If you don't do that, if you say, you know what, kids, go to your fucking room. You know what, kids, me and him now. If the red light's on, if the room is rocking, don't come knocking. Right? That's you, women. If you want to have a good marriage, here's your secret to success, ladies. Secret to keep daddy happy. Right? To keep it's not happy wife, happy life. It's happy dad makes for a happy life. Happy dad prioritizing him and following in his, like having a guy that you have the trust, security in this guy. If that's the case, then you need to prioritize that guy above even your kids, above your dogs, above your job, above your family, your extended family. He has to be put first. And that's not like, oh, well, what if he's an abusive asshole? Who cares? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you go stick with an abusive asshole. Sure, go ahead. I'm saying that you need to prioritize that guy. That guy has to come before everything else. That relationship, the marriage has to come before everything else. And women won't do that because they think men are ridiculous, stupid buffoons. Just go watch Family Guy. Just go watch King of the Hill. I totally wanted to use the King of the Hill intro music for today's show, but I was worried I was going to get a copyright strike for that. That would have been good though, huh? I haven't watched that show in so long. I love Boomhauser. Boomhauser is my favorite. It's my Boomhauser look. Thomas, you always say observing a process changes that process. Anything changed for Mrs. Tomassi observing you talk? Yeah, I get this question all the time, Thomas. And yeah, but here's the thing. I forget which law of power this is. Never teach anyone all of your tricks. Put that in your hat. Put that under your hat, man. That was Thomas. So yeah, it does. It will. There's nothing you can do about it. I've also written extensively about this, as you might guess, which is the secret of the red pill. Never reveal, what happens, I think what's the problem with a lot of guys, particularly gamma guys, and this is Vox Day's sociosexual hierarchy, gamma guys tend to think that if they reveal that they're red pill, that's going to make them in some way special, or it's going to make them more attractive. It doesn't. Your intelligence, here's another show in the offing. Intelligence does nothing for it. Intelligence is almost anti-seductive for women, particularly today. But when you know why gammas fail, gamma men and beta men in general fail, is because they think that they should be appreciated for their intelligence. They think they should be appreciated for their rationality and their reasonability. And this is where, I'm going to throw you a monkey wrench into all of this because I'm the rational male, right? That's my books. You have to be able to understand emotions too, and to use those things. You want to have a success. You want to get laid. You want to have a successful job. You want to have a successful, you want to have a good relationship with your mom, your sister, or your whoever. You have to learn how women work and use it to your advantage. That's really all PUA is. Well, that's horrible and manipulative. Well, life is manipulation. Life is negotiation. Life is seduction. Life is trying to get people to come around to your way of thinking, right? Life is, And there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody does it to you. Every time you want to turn on the TV and watch a commercial, you probably have seen you. Well, you're definitely going to see some ads in this show, but people are trying to like, shit, I got my own book here. I would like very much for you all to go buy my book. I think it will help you. I think it's a good thing. Please do. Please buy it. But there you go. So that's that. What else do I got? So is that you? Oh, what'd you say? What is the evolutionary origin of foot fetishism? Apparently 1 in 3 guys has it. 1 in 3 guys. Well, not this guy. Would love to hear your take on this phenomenon. Oh boy. Did I miss something? I think I missed something. Hold on a second. I got to, maybe I didn't. What is the origin of foot fetishism? Okay, I got it. Okay, so now I think I'm caught up now. You always observation. Okay. So anyways, Carmen Marwa asks this question, the foot fetish. I don't know. I don't know why guys get off on feet. I never even realized that guys actually thought women's feet were in any way sexualized until I think I read this in probably like some magazine back in the 80s. I found that, Tommy Lee from Motley Crue had a foot fetish and how he loved like Heather Locklear's feet, whatever. Was it Heather Locklear's feet? And I'm like, what the hell did this come from? Like that's a thing. And then I realized, and of course I have studied, I don't want to say studied, but I've read stuff about like how there was like foot binding in China. And how like the dynastic emperors in the Forbidden City would like wrap the little girls' feet so they would fit in these little teeny tiny like shoes, and they would like completely like crush their feet to fit in there. There's always going to be like fetishes. I think this is just one more thing that guys sort of get off on, because I think that for men. Sexuality is way more variable in like specifics. Now, for women, women like get off on like dogs going at it or chimps going at it or men going at it with other men. If you go and you look at the work that, Meredith Chivers, Dr. Meredith Chivers, I can't remember her name. I think she's a British sexologist or something like that. She's done these studies where I forget what the device is called, but I won't get too graphic here, but they have sort of measured the sexual response between men and women, showing them various, I guess in this case, pornographic imagery and such. And women tend to get off on a great deal more than most guys really understand. But men are more specific, and heterosexual men tend to be more specific. When it comes to like homosexual men and heterosexual men, when you're looking at like for men, our sexual mechanics don't change whether they're homosexual or heterosexual, despite whatever Roosh is saying right now. The only thing is for homosexual men, the strictures or the limitations of women's hypergamous filter, like getting past that, or like the barrier, let's just say, to getting to unlimited access to unlimited sexuality with women is much more difficult than it is for getting it with other men, because they're on the same page. Like, they're like, you want to get off? Yeah, me too. Okay. So, and then that's homosexuality, right? Tend to be more promiscuous, tend to be more like, when it comes to, there's probably going to be homosexual men who are going to say, well, I'm monogamous. Yeah, but how promiscuous were you before you decided that you wanted to find something that's a little more conventional? And I think that's interesting about, and this, I'll save this for one of these days, I'll give a homosexual talk. I think that is interesting when it comes to monogamy and it comes to sort of this tradition thing, because I've always found it fascinating that despite the unconventionality, let's say, of homosexuality, homosexual men and homosexual women still opt for, or they would like to get to a state of normalcy where they have one partner that is either the dominant or the sub. And there's still that human dynamic between same-sex partners, or the desire for it anyways. Like, why would, I always thought that was funny. Like, why would homosexuals want to have to be married? Why not just create something else for yourself? Like, leave that to heterosexuals. They do whatever we're going to have this thing called whatever it is. Not marriage, but like pairing. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Like, we're going to be monogamous and we're going to call it something different. Why not just do something like that? Have it legally recognized, whatever. Why not just do something like that? No, it has to be marriage. We have to have what you have. And it's not because it's a difference, well, maybe in a little bit in ideology. I think it's really more of a desire to have that stability, to have the same kind of security that comes from what? From heteronormative relationships. Why? Because you're a human being. That's what humans want. So, to have kids and do all the, let's pretend that we're in a heteronormative relationship, but we're both the same sex. I'm not, I'll let you guys make the judgment call, but when I look at this, I see this as just human beings wanting something that other human beings want. They want the same thing. Oh, we want to do it with another one of our same sex. All right. Well, like when we talk about, and God, I'm not ruining this thing, but when we talk about like gender fluidity, right? Or we talk about sexual fluidity. And I actually wrote another essay about this based off of I think it was an article or an essay, or maybe it was a show that Oprah did. She was talking about how all these women, when they get to be like 40 years old and they find themselves divorced, that they find themselves suddenly lesbians, and they're feminine women, like females, they're the subs, and they're looking for masculine, like dominant lesbian partners. They're looking for a man. In fact, they even say as much. They say, this so-and-so, Susan, Sharon, whatever, she's more of a man than the ex-husband I divorced. Or she's just as much a man as my father. Like, they love their father, but suddenly now they're lesbians after being heterosexual for 40 years. Whatever. Now, and so it's just this, but they're still looking for that dominant sub. They're still looking for security. They're still looking for what they can't find for whatever reason in a man, in a woman, or vice versa. It could be the other way around too. So anyways, I'll throw that out there. But for when it comes to fetishes, I think that men tend to go, and I've said this before, I've written 2 essays on this. 2, yeah. Men, when they have fetishes, usually we don't call them fetishes anymore. We kind of call them preferences. So guys, I've had guys who say, well, I prefer fat women. Yeah, because at some point it was easier to get sex from the fat girl than it was from the girl who was really hot, who you really wanted to get with because she looks like the Playboy centerfold. It wasn't because you had some like innate, like some twisted, I don't know why I'm like this. Yeah, it was, you were sexually successful at it and you want to repeat the process. So like when guys say, well, I'm into this kind of girl. I'm into Asians. I'm into foot binding. I'm into BDSM. I'm into girls who smoke cigarettes. I don't know, whatever your fetish kind of thing is. I think guys, we become more specific to things that were sexually successful for us in the past. So, and another thing is, I think that a lot of guys end up getting into sort of fetishism because they think it sets them apart, or they think it makes them unique. And I'm not saying that they don't get off on it or they're not aroused by it. They probably are. But it's one of those things where it's like eroticizing jealousy, like cuckold porn, right? Why is that such a popular niche of porn right now? Well, there's social implications of that as well, but it's eroticizing jealousy. Why do guys get into it with girls with big gigundo majigums, right? Or why is it that women, that they like girls who are skinny like spinners, right? Like they're skinny white, like pale white, little boobs, and they're spinners, right? Why do they get into that? Why is that a thing? Well, maybe that's what they've been sexually successful with in the past, or maybe it's something that they feel like, oh, that'll set me apart. Hey, I'm really into you're my type of girl. Type of girl is the type of girl who's going to solve your reproductive problem. Not that you don't get off on that, not that you haven't, eroticized that, not that the thought of that doesn't, arouse you. It probably does. Again, I'm not a sexologist, but I would say that at some stage, that particular look, that fetish, you've eroticized that fetish. So what I was saying before is like guys who are into poly, they have to find some way to eroticize the jealousy instinct. Well, that's not to like, that might be a conscious choice. In some ways, eroticizing other things like a body part, like ankles. Like ankles used to be a thing, right? Wasn't that? Is that an African thing? like where like women have to wear long skirts and you can't show the ankles. Like that was maybe it's not African, because I know that there was like ankles, like women's ankles were also like sexualized. Like breasts, no big deal. But if you show your ankles, oh my God. Because there is maybe it's a learned process. I don't think it's an innate process, but I think there's a learned process to say, well, women's ankles are very sexy. You know what I like? And maybe this is too much information. You know what I really like in a woman's physique is I like and my wife has this too, which maybe this is just me, but I like a woman's lower back. Like if she's in really good shape, I don't want to say muscular, but like she's in really good shape and she's thin and she's shapely, she's got a nice ass, she's got good legs and everything. Like usually it's women who are thinner, but they have like that dip in the lower back right there. And maybe that's just me. And that right there, I don't know. Maybe it's just like, I'm an artist, right? If I was drawing like my wife or women or something, that'd be the first place I'd start. And that's not like, of course I love my wife's boobs and her butt and everything else, right? And I like women just in general, like the way they look, but I don't know what it is about that. Maybe that's just me, but I think that it's probably a learned thing. Let's see. Hector says, great job today. Oh, thank you very much on behalf of Harry Butthole. Everybody says that they laugh because I know Harry Butthole comes out. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to find a big old image of a Harry Butthole and I'm going to put it as I should put it as a splash screen. No, I'm not going to do that. I would never do that to you guys. All right. I think that was it. Oh, I got AFA. He says, opinion on girls making decisions when to marry. On girls making decisions. You mean girls deciding when they're going to get married? Or when... Sounds like a fetish. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? What about it? Opinions on girls making decisions when to get married. Well, when usually this comes right around the Epiphany Phase, which is coincidentally coincides with the idea that, my biological clock is ticking. Go look at the AFA. Go look at the biological clock video that I did. The myth of the biological clock. It pretty much answers that question for you. And last one of the day, because I'm going to get out of here today. It's going to be early. RKJ, whatever. I've been told that a woman who doesn't put her kids first is a red flag. Of course you have, because what that is a cult of the child. Anything that is in the best interest of the kids is always should always be anyone's priority, whether you're male or female, right? You want to know why? I think this is sort of like maybe it's instinctual to human beings. You want to know why women tend to be the ones who get primary custody of the child in a divorce is because of the cult of the child. What's in the best interest of the child? The best interest of the child is that the father, the biological father, doesn't find out that the kid isn't his. That's in the best interest of the child. That's what they'll say, right? When I was just saying a minute ago, is like the legislation is wherever you're at. It makes it very difficult for men to get a DNA test, period. But even when a medical professional knows that the child is not biologically that guy, they are legally compelled not to tell the man that the kid isn't his, and he's making payments and he's investing himself emotionally, financially, personally, family-wise into a child that's not his. Why don't they tell them that? Why is it that's the case? The case is because it is the cult of the child's interest. Well, it's better for the child to have a father who's invested. Maybe that's true. Have a father that's invested, have a father who loves it and emotionally and financially and whatever, has put himself into it. And by informing that guy that it is not his kid, therefore it is in the best interest of the child. Because if he finds out, maybe he'll kill the child, right? Or maybe he'll leave, or maybe he'll withdraw. Maybe he'll pull us, or maybe he'll divorce the woman. Well, that would be horrible for the kid, right? Well, yeah. The guy, personally, from an evolved perspective, from an evolutionary perspective, the paternity, the existential fear, the paternal instinct in that guy is betrayed. And that's the ultimate betrayal. It's like, well, and guys have to work past that. I'm not saying that guys can't or haven't done that. I'm sure they have. They find out that the kid's not theirs and they still love the kid no matter what. And then the woman says, well, what kind of man would do that? And then she ends up leaving him or whatever, or maybe she stays with him, whatever. I think that I think that there's a sort of a psychological change that happens if the guy finds out the kid's not actually his. And I think it happens in the woman, the mother. Well, he found out that I cuckolded him and he's still cool with that. From a cognitive, rational, reasonable side of things, women might go, oh, it's so loving. Great. You know, that's what I'm supposed to say. He's a hero. But I think on a lower kind of lizard brain, hindbrain, confirmation is she's saying, well, what kind of guy wouldn't beat the hell out of me for that? What kind of guy would accept that? The kind of guy who's a chump, the kind of guy who doesn't have options, the kind of guy who won't stand up for himself, the kind of guy who will take anything, the kind of guy who won't throw a fit. He won't divorce me because he found out that. Well, what else will he do? He's not that I think the protector dynamic or the protector understanding gets, or the desire for it gets sort of changed. I'm wondering, and I don't know this for a fact, so I'm spitballing here, but I think that on some level of consciousness, when women realize that guy will accept his being cuckolded, that confirms everything. Like that's when everything starts to go downhill. He is accepting the fact that I cuckolded him. I did it on the sly, and he's still okay with it. Or he still thinks he's okay with it. Well, thank God, right? The kid's got a thing, right? Okay, well, it's fine. But when that woman realizes that, I think something changes, and I think it changes the nature of the relationship after that. And I would also say that the guy who's too stupid to figure it out or doesn't want to know, or maybe she's tricked him so convincingly, I think that there's a different relationship between a woman who has cuckolded a man and the guy either doesn't know it or he does know it and he's accepted it, than the guy who is the biological father and who she has confidence in for her own security and the security of the kids. Because after a while, like I've said this before, like old ladies have said, I've heard old ladies say this, is like when their husband dies, they'll say, well, there's just a part of me that Fred could never have. Yeah, because Fred was the beta that you decided to spend your life with, rather than the one that got away, the alpha that got away. And so there's a switch, and I don't think women ever really, maybe later in their lives, they cognitively kind of accept that or they acknowledge it. But when that guy is a cuckold and she realizes he's a cuckold, there's something like there's no getting around that. I tricked him. That's not his kid. I know that she knows that. She probably at some point will tell the kid that too. It's our key. It's our secret. Let's keep it secret. Don't tell dad, because dad will lose his mind. Dad will flip out. He'll kill himself. We can't have that. You don't want to hurt dad. So keep it on the slide. Don't keep it down low. Okay. But you were actually, or I get this. Guys will tell me that they'll find out, however, it's the age of social media, right? They'll find out that the child was named by the woman, by the mother, after the guy that was her alpha widow. That was the guy that she really wanted to get with. And maybe the kid's even his kid, right? Maybe you wouldn't need to go get a DNA test at that point. But I've had several guys tell me that they're basically ready to divorce their wives, or they're basically destroyed their relationship because at some point along the way, they found out that she named the kid Ryan or Tyler or some shit like that, right? And that kid's name was the name of the guy that she couldn't get over in college, or the guy that was her first boyfriend, or the guy that basically the alpha widow, the guy who was the guy that she couldn't get over, the one that so she named the kid that. Remember when we were talking about, God, I'm getting into some deep shit here, and I gotta quit. But remember when we were talking about promise keepers? What is the purpose of a woman naming that child? Usually it's a son. Well, I guess it would have to be son, like name that child after a former lover. What is psychologically going on in that situation? I would argue that what she's doing is she's trying to in some way recapture that in the child. I got this chump beta that I'm with right now, this beta in waiting. He's not as exciting, but at least I can pretend, or I can name this kid after the guy who I really wanted to lock down, but I couldn't. And it's more common than you think. So I hate to leave you on a low note, but I really think that I get that so much from guys right now, where they will find out that the name is name of some ex-lover. I would be pissed. I would, that you need to really reassess things when it comes to taking a woman taking a man's last name. I've said this before, is that when a man's last name is like the identifier of his genetics. So when a woman won't take your last name, she doesn't want your genes. That's what really, the Tomassi line, right? That I want it to go into perpetuity. So my kids get my last name, so they know what the identifier of those genetics are. I don't care what your genetics are, right? Like right now, we're trying to pretend like, paternity doesn't matter, everything's fine. Like who cares what the name? Like guys will go and take their wives' last names because they don't understand. They have no. And I realize there's a cultural thing and there's an ethical, or there's a cultural and ethnic kind of thing that goes along with that too, because certain religions don't do that and others do. The fact of the matter is that when women don't accept your surname, your last name, they don't want the identifier. They don't want that. They don't want to be owned. Like women will say, well, taking a man's last name is a form of it's patriarchy and it's ownership. Yeah, it used to be. It was an identifier of your family affiliation, your kin affiliation. When women don't do that, they don't want to be your kin. They don't want to be affiliated with you to the point where they're saying your genetic identifier, your last name that everyone in your family, all the males in your family had up until you, and you think you're being so progressive and everything, it doesn't matter. And you don't want to name your kid after whatever, or the kid decides that he doesn't want your name because of your shitty genetics or whatever. That right there is remember, that's an identifier. Your last name is an identifier of your genetic line. You can change your last name, sure. Okay, fine. But what's in the name? Who cares? But certainly in a patrilinear society, in a patrilinear thing, that last name is very important. That's why kings would get rid of queens, because they couldn't provide a male heir to carry on that genetic identifier. Something to think about. Anyways, okay, guys, I'm gonna go now. Thank you very much for the father. This has been the Father's Day event. I have closed comments on the Rational Male blog, and I wanted to put that out before I close out today. I did that because of the present social state. I will not have my blog shut down in the same way that Hartiste was, or Royce, whatever. I will not have that happen to almost 10 years of work, because people because of deliberate actions, I would say, by people who want to see my blog go away and me go away and my book go away. And I'm not going to name names, but I pretty much, from third-party confirmation, I know I got a good idea who it is. So I've closed out the comments on my blog for the time being. I'm working on sort of redesigning it and putting it together. And I'm also looking for a new comment system so that I can have a little bit more control over it. But until things kind of change a little bit, and people aren't trying to, get me canceled, get the Rational Male canceled, or this show, or me, or whatever, my book, whatever, everyone's attacking right now, and it's never been easier. And the barrier to entry, barrier to canceling has never been easier. So you say something that offends someone, you piss somebody off, and it's never been easier to get them erased. So that's why the comments are closed right now. I'm sorry you have to bear the brunt of that, but like I said, it's temporary. I will put them back up at some point. But as it stands right now, I'm doing one post a month, because I am focusing all of my writing efforts on the book right now, and editing the book and putting new stuff into it as things unfold, according to the world. I'm trying to make it as relevant as I possibly can, but things keep changing so rapidly right now. I'm in the process of writing the foreword. Afterward's pretty much done right now. The introduction's done. Those are actually, it's funny, is those sections, like I always do a foreword, an afterword, and an introduction. I usually have somebody else write the foreword. I was going to have Pat Campbell write the foreword to this book, but because of his health issues and such, I'm probably going to do it myself. He's recovering. He's, as I said before, he's been through chemo, and I don't want to put that on him. So I am doing it myself. And those tend to be like the toughest parts, because you have to try to make things relevant. And the problem is like, whenever I write a book, I think one of the reasons why the Rational Male is kind of like this, evergreen book, I guess, or this living text, is because there's no real dating to it. It's not like in 2019 I did this. There's no dating to it, so I have to be very careful of that. Also, this book is my most sources cited book that I've ever written. And so I have to be very particular about that. I'm doing everything according to AP style sheets. And if you guys are in college, you know what I'm talking about. So I'm trying to be as accurate and bulletproof as I possibly can for this. So that's why I'm working on that. So anyways, that's the update for all of this stuff. I will be on Wednesday again. I don't have any interviews set up. I might be doing an interview soon. I will let you guys know on Twitter who that's going to be with. So Wednesday will be my next day, and now it's almost time to go fishing. So thank you guys for following. Hit the subscription button if you guys want to help support what it is I do. All of the links are below in the description, and I will see you guys on Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Bye-bye.